right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting, Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposed limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Town of Norton Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found at the Town of Norton's website, www.nortonma.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to participate may do so in the following ways. The first is to join online by video. Please click the link. Let's see. Paul, is that link on the planning board site as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the link is on the planning board website as well,
Okay.
as well as on the agenda.
Okay. The link is on the agenda as well, or you can go to the planning board website and click the link for Zoom. To call in only, please call 646-558-8656 and enter meeting ID 639-151-9600. To join Zoom, using the Zoom app, please enter meeting ID 639-151-960. You may need to try multiple times to connect. It's also been brought to my attention, I think the old phone number was listed on one of the notices. So if anyone has called into that, I believe Nicole is monitoring that line and directing people to this line. You may also view the meeting on Norton Cable Access Channel 15 or the next day on the Norton Media Center YouTube page. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In addition, please feel free to email questions to the board ahead of the meeting or during the meeting to pdigiuseppe@nortonmaus.com. Additionally, you'll find our meeting materials at the planning board website at nortonma.org. Again, every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we're unable to do so despite best efforts, we'll post on the Town of Norton website at, once again, www.nortonma.org, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible thereafter. You never get tired of speaking all that.
Steve, once Governor Baker lifts the stay-at-home order, we can suspend the open meeting law, right?
I believe so. So what we're going to do is, before we get started, I don't think we don't have any minutes, right, Paul? Or bills?
Correct. We don't have minutes for tonight, and there were no bills.
Okay. So really quickly, right before we get into the public hearing on the marijuana bylaw amendment, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware. If you could just keep your what we're going to do is we're going to have a presentation, and then we'll have board members asking their questions, and then we'll open it up to the public to ask any questions they have. So in the meantime, could everyone just make sure you mute your computers so we're not getting feedback. Otherwise, I believe we do have the possibility to mute everyone. I don't want to have to do that, so just take a second, mute your computers now through Zoom. Or if you're on the phone, you can do it through the phone. All right. Thank you. And I think we're ready to go here. All right, who do we have on that's going to present for this marijuana bylaw? Sorry, zoning.
Steve, this is Tim. I was going to ask before we dove into the presentation, do we have anything we want to say about town meeting as a whole?
I'm sorry, Tim?
Do we want to say anything about town meeting as a whole and status, as a whole, and the status of it and everything?
What's the, Renee, maybe you can let me know. You didn't change the date, right?
We have not changed the date, no. So the date holds at June 8th right now. We don't anticipate having a meeting on that day, but we have to follow the requirements. We are going to regroup, we believe, on May 19th after the governor subcommittee issues its recommendations, and then hopefully we'll have information to make a better determination of a new date.
So the idea is to proceed as if there is a meeting June 8th, even though we're all pretty sure that there's nothing to do, so.
Chair, can I add something to that?
Sure.
That for the public joining, that there was a question that came up prior to the meeting, and I think it's important to just pass along, is that the prior to going to town meeting, any proposal to change our zoning bylaw by our town charter requires that the planning board review and make a recommendation, and that recommendation goes to town meeting. So that's the reason that the planning board is hearing these items tonight.
Somebody have a beeping over?
I think Paul's trying to find him.
Well, I'm muting my computer, so it's not my house. You get it, Paul? All right. And again, this is going to be, I think, the first of at least 2 nights where we discuss all this, but right there as well. Any other questions? Move forward. No? All right, Renee, you can go ahead if you're ready.
Okay, great. I just need to, Paul, have permission. Oh, I do have permission to share. I needed to we have quorum for the Industrial Development Commission, so I just need to call the meeting to order at 7:23 for the IDC. Those in attendance, I have to scroll through the screen, are myself, Renee Daly, Laura Parker, Sandy Olerhead, Michael Toll, Denise Luciano, and I don't see anyone else, but I'll open it up. If there is somebody else on the line, please identify.
It looks like there's 2 pages of.
Yeah, I looked, I just see numbers, so.
Renee, if you could just remind people to mute their mics if they're not speaking.
Yes, please, if you're not speaking, mute your microphone. And as the chairman said, we'll go through the presentation, and then the planning board will have an opportunity to ask questions, and then I believe we'll open up to the public.
I don't know, you can put them on again.
So, Paul, I have permissions to share. I don't have permissions to mute everyone. Okay, give me one second, folks.
Okay, let's try it like this, Renee. I haven't done the mute all, but if it's an issue, I'll do it.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Give me just 1 second. I'm trying to find a bylaw to pull it up. It appears that when you have multiple screens up, it won't actually show all of them. So I'm going to see here if it shares. Can you guys see my screen? It shows Article 26.
Yes, we did.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you again for having us at this public hearing so that we can review the marijuana bylaw and overlay district with you again. As you know, we've worked on this for several months. We've met with you on multiple occasions, as well as members of your subcommittee in soliciting feedback and information to ensure that we were not only approaching this in the right format, but making sure that all the issues or concerns that you guys had were addressed. Give me just 1 second here. I have to move the video. Okay. So a couple of things that we'll discuss today. We'll discuss the article that is currently on the town meeting warrant. I'll talk about a couple of changes that we identified. We had an opportunity to meet with Oren separately, and he had brought up some concerns in just specifically understanding the language and making sure that a couple questions were answered by town council. So I'll cover those as we get to them. But essentially, we'll review the article as written, and then we'll review the overlay district as well. A note to the overlay district, we do have the version that we'll see. I know that we had some feedback in respect to removing the watershed protection layer, and then also seeing it as a satellite. So we do have those changes that are going into effect. We didn't have them in time for this meeting, but we'll certainly share them and post them once those are completed for us. Okay. So a couple things. The first part on my screen for Article 26, which I believe now is actually Article 24 in the town meeting warrant. This just talks about what we're actually proposing to the town on voting in respect to the articles that we're changing. Both article for the use regulations and site plan approval, and then Article 21, which is a delete and replace, which is our existing registered medical marijuana dispensary. I had to think about those. So if I can just refresh your memories, currently we have a bylaw that was put in place for a registered medical marijuana dispensary, an RMD. In 2017, we also voted at the town meeting to, somebody has some music playing in the background. Can you just mute your phone? Or they have the news for COVID-19. Thank you so much. In 2017, at the town meeting, we voted to include marijuana establishments within industrial zones. At that time, while we changed the use for that under the commercial uses, we did not make any modifications to the bylaw. So there were some gaps that we identified in respect to the existing Article 21 on the RMDs that talks specifically about the RMDs and not about adult use marijuana. So the IDC got together. We've been working on this for several months, actually probably now close to a year, to not only review what we had from a bylaw perspective, but also review some of best practices across the state, some things other folks did, and then consider what we wanted in respect to the town of Norton to make sure that we were not only presenting this as an economic project, which it is, but making sure that we stayed within the character of the town. So having said that, something to note with the 2017 vote is, while we did identify that we could have marijuana establishments within industrial areas, we did not do anything further from that. So there was no identification for a site plan approval or a special permit that was attached to the marijuana establishments. It was only for an RMD. So those are a couple of things on why there's a full delete and replace on this article. On my screen, you'll see the Article 5B4. I can get this today. On the use regulations for the commercial uses. So there's been a change since we put this in place. The registered medical marijuana dispensary is now referred to as a medical marijuana treatment center. So we made those changes throughout. Additionally, we kept for a marijuana establishment that excludes social consumption establishments in respect to the areas for the zoning districts. You'll see the adds here are, in addition to industrial, also a special permit for village commercial and commercial, which we'll talk about a little bit more. One of the things that you'll see within the bylaw that we did designate on this section here is that two essential criteria need to be met in order for a marijuana establishment to be within the marijuana overlay district. One, that it is designated as a marijuana overlay district, and it is either a village commercial, or industrial. And I mention that because as we go through here, you'll see an item where we talk about split parcels, which we have several throughout the town. And so we were very specific in the bylaw to make sure that where those split parcels were, while the overlay may show over a residential area, a marijuana establishment cannot go in that area because it's not zoned appropriately from the perspective of village commercial, or industrial. We made minor changes to the site plan approval where we added in the marijuana establishments in addition to the medical treatment center. And this is to not only ensure that the site approval process occurs, but also that it's in, what's the word I want, in compliance with the Cannabis Control Commission. So you'll see just some general changes, marijuana establishments, the MTCs, they're replacing the RMDs. I won't say that there's anything material here except for the inclusion of the marijuana establishments. And let me speak as we go through here, just for those who may not know. When I say marijuana establishments, we're talking about multiple different types of establishments. So it includes retail dispensaries, it can include manufacturing, transportation, or which I often refer to as distribution, also cultivation. So when I use marijuana establishments, we did not make any change to the marijuana establishment definition in our existing bylaws, but it does include more than just retail dispensaries, which most people associate with marijuana establishments. Okay. So we'll see, hold on, I just have to minimize my screen here. So for Article 21, this again was a delete and replace. This was the existing registered marijuana dispensary, and it is now the marijuana establishments and medical marijuana treatment centers. So the bylaw oversees all the marijuana establishments and the medical marijuana treatment centers. One thing that changed from several years ago is both of these are now under the Cannabis Control Commission, so their regulations apply across the two different areas. Previously, the MTCs were under, I believe, the Board of Health or Public Health Department. So that has changed since we initially voted for this in 2017. The 21.2 here in respect to the establishment, this shows that we have established a marijuana overlay district, and we did so over 5 different segments. And you'll see when we go through the maps, they are identified as Route 140 North, East Main Street Business Parks, Norton Commerce Center, industrial zones in South Norton, and then the business and industrial zones in Chartley. And you'll see again, those are imposed over village commercial zoning districts, industrial zoning district, and commercial zoning districts. Additionally, one of the things, as I mentioned, in respect to the split parcels, you'll see the last sentence here. It says where a parcel is split between residential zoning district and either village commercial, or industrial, the marijuana establishment or MTC may not be built or established on the residential portion of the parcel. On section 175.21.3 for definitions, what we did here is the section was previously included within the previous bylaw. What we did here is we went through to identify what definitions were pertinent for just and really for ease of use. And when I say ease of use, it's so that somebody, if we referred to cannabis or marijuana, that we provided a definition within our bylaw and they didn't have to go through the Mass General Law or the Cannabis Control Commission to see what exactly we were referring to. So those definitions that we either felt were important or are referenced within the bylaw are included within here. And I won't go through these specifically. I will mention one thing that's different, and I believe that the board is aware of this, is the host community agreement. This is the agreement that we would enter into as a town of Norton. I mention this on here because it does talk about the legislative body of the municipality is responsible for negotiating the HCA, and that is that responsibility does lie with the Board of Selectmen. I know that was a question early on when we met. So it goes through various definitions. Please feel free, board members, to stop me if you want me to review any one of these. But there were no significant changes from the initial review that we had. We just made sure that where the definitions existed with the CCC, that we were in compliance to what they wrote within that guideline.
Renee?
Yes.
Renee, this is Joe. The legislative body of the municipality, in this case is town meeting, shouldn't that be the executive body? Board of Selectmen is the executive body.
I will defer to Denise on that, but certainly if that's not documented correctly, we can make that change. Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
My apologies. What section are we talking about?
It was up top, Denise, where it talks about the HCA being negotiated. It's listing the legislative body of the municipality and not the executive.
Yeah, we need to make a correction there probably, yeah. Sorry.
No, but this is, I don't know if HCA was one of the definitions from the CCC. I know there were a couple that were not. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so on 21.5, additional requirements and conditions. So I want to take a moment just to read through these so that there's clear understanding of them. Obviously the first one just talks about in respect to the use, that any type of marijuana establishment or the medical treatment center may only be involved in the uses permitted by its definition, may not include other businesses or services. So pretty clear cut. Additionally, there's always been a lot of concern about on-site consumption. This item number 2 does state that no marijuana shall be smoked, eaten, or otherwise consumed or ingested within the premises. Item 3 details the hours of operations set by the special permit granting authority, and which we identified from the IDC that there would not be any retail sale of marijuana shall occur between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. On the next item, we talk about commencing the operation, that they have to apply for a building permit prior to, and making sure all required permits and approvals, including but not limited to the final license from the appropriate commission, is completed. Item number 5 is in respect to the number of adult use marijuana retail establishments that would be permitted within the town. This is identified as not exceeding 20% of the number of licenses for the retail sale of alcoholic beverages, not to be drunk on the premises where sold under MGL Chapter 138, Section 15. I know, Joe, we had some discussion earlier about that language. We did talk about that again from the IDC, and this is the state guidelines, and so we decided to comply with the state guidelines in here, understanding that should that change, I know you mentioned, there may be some possible changes in the liquor licenses. We would expect that the Cannabis Control Commission would change the information as well. So we would abide by, depending upon what they issued at that time, we would anticipate that we would abide by that.
Denise, Renee.
Yep.
On that issue, the board of selectmen Thursday night talked about potential for adding 2 more. Once the 2020 census is in, quite likely there will be yet 1 more all-alcoholic beverage license. So, again, I fail to understand why you don't just list that the number of marijuana establishments or MCCs shall be X for every 5,000, 10,000, whatever, so that you have a real number. Because the number of alcoholic beverage licenses is subject to change both by the population change, and if in fact you pursue the home rule petition for additional licenses, you're automatically going to change the number of marijuana licenses.
So Joe, this is a state requirement. So if our numbers did go up, the state requires that we have a minimum of 20% of the number of licenses. The liquor license that you're talking about is a full liquor license, and it is not one that's listed here. So we currently have the.
It's a Section 15 license.
Yes, and so my understanding is, while we have the 9 package licenses, and that's what we go by, what they were talking about adding was it was not this license, it was a full liquor license, which I believe right now we only have 2 or 3.
No, you have 4, and you're looking for an additional 2, possibly. And when the 2020 census is finalized, you'll likely have 1 more because we'll probably hit 20,000 people. Again, I haven't looked to see what the legislation requires or the Cannabis Control Commission requires, but I can't imagine that they care that you link it to liquor licenses. It's, I assume, a population calculation, but again, I've made my point, and I'll leave it at that.
No, I understand. Like I said, we did discuss this, and we wanted to stay within the state requirements. As I mentioned, if our liquor licenses did increase because of population, right, the state minimum is 20% of those licenses. So it's not specific. If we wanted to do something less, if we wanted to keep it, I would just throw out a number. If we wanted to keep it at 2, right? But our numbers showed that we had more, say we had 11, we would have to have 11 licenses, I believe, in order for 2 to go to 3. If that occurred and we wanted to keep it at 2, we would have to have a separate bylaw and a ballot vote for that. It's because this is the state minimum. So anything outside of the state minimum, we would have to pursue separately.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Okay. The next section under physical requirements. A couple of things just to note here is that it talks a lot about visibility and not being visible from the exterior. So there's another item here as well. If you think of a retail dispensary, they're really looking at windows that you can't see in from the outside. And then they have other items here, like no outside storage is permitted, and then they talk about ventilation. Their ventilation is listed here, and then it also proceeds into odor from marijuana or its processing. There's another section below that addresses odor as well, and just for informational purposes, the host community agreement also addresses odor mitigation. Additionally, it talks about signage that has to be displayed on the marijuana establishment, noting that the access to the facility is limited to individuals 21 years or older. I'm just looking for some of the highlights. Under the location, I think a couple good things that were listed here is the establishments or the MTCs are encouraged to utilize existing vacant buildings. They have to be located, again, within the marijuana overlay district. The third item is a requirement from the state in which no marijuana establishment can be located on a parcel which is within 500 feet of an educational facility for kindergarten to grade 12. While local towns have the ability to reduce that limit, we did stay with the state requirement of 500 feet. The next item here, this is an item that we identified we needed a minor change to, and again, any changes to this will send to the board separately so that you do have that and you're aware of those. But this item here was supposed to read that no marijuana retail establishments or MTC shall be located on a parcel which is within 500 feet of a next marijuana establishment or MTC. So there's one word that we'll be adding in there, and we'll notify you once we make that change and then have it approved by town council.
And Renee, this is Tim, just for the public. Our guidance from town council has been that while the town has the ability to shrink the 500-foot line, we do not necessarily, under the state guidelines, have the ability to make that larger, correct?
Correct. So I don't think that came directly from town council. I believe that we talked about it early on, but one of the things, there's been some legality issues in areas that have exceeded the 500 feet and have also put in different parameters. And when I think about it in my mind, I think of it like spot zoning, right? So you're saying, well, these certain things can't have it next to it, and you're not really following the true letter of the law. So yeah, so again, we didn't want to reduce the 500 feet. We felt that was appropriate, and that's one of the things, when we looked at when we have the you'll see the difference when we go through the overlay. There's an industrial area that at face value right now it's within, somebody could go in there with a marijuana establishment and actually operate from there, because it says that you can't tell within our map that it's actually within 500 feet of a school. So with the overlay district, it's not included in there, so it's easily identified that it is something that cannot be located in that area. But that's a great question. Thank you.
The public speak right now?
I believe the public comments are following the boards.
Okay.
Mr. Vincent. The next section just talks about reporting requirements. So it lists many different areas: police department, fire department, building commissioner, and then of course a special permit granting authority. It goes through certain scenarios in respect to change of ownership, violations that may occur, as well as if there's a request from the planning board to actually see an annual written report, that would happen at the end of each calendar year and no later than January 31st. There's also an item in here just noting that the owner or the manager of the establishment or the MTC is required to respond within 24 hours if contacted by a town official. The next section here I want to mention, when we met with Orrin the last time, there are, I believe, items, and Denise, please correct me if I'm wrong, but items 1, 2, and 3. Now, when we read them, we just wanted to make sure from town council, just have a special look over these again to confirm that the language is appropriate. And it just talks about the permit and the plan approval being issued to the establishment or the owner, that they're issued for a specific type of establishment, and then that they're not transferable and they have a term limit. And some of that is listed within the HCA where it talks about the host community agreement is in effect for 5 years. And that is, well, it's required from the state to have it for any retail or medical dispensary. We have applied that across all marijuana establishments for the town of Norton.
That's correct, Renee. We had the question out to council about whether or not it conflicted with current practices regarding permitting.
The real question was whether, because typically a special permit runs to the land, it's recorded, and that was really the question with number 1, as you have it running to the operator and not to the property.
Or I'm sorry, can you get a little closer? I just can't hear you.
The question was with respect to what was number 1, special permits typically run with the land. They're issued as a decision and they're recorded in the registry of deeds for that purpose. And the question that I had raised was just question whether it could run specifically to an entity that's other than the landowner. And that was the question. I don't know if they responded to that or not.
I thought we had responded to that earlier.
No,
sorry,
that's
Denise.
the question that was raised and so you can take it up to town council.
That is the question that I have in our most current version, yes. I don't know that town council has had a chance to respond to that yet.
That's correct.
Okay.
But I do remember, and maybe Warren, I'm just thinking of the conversation because I remember talking about how it was identified as the owner because of the host community agreement, but we'll certainly confirm that. And if there are any changes to the language, I'll identify those separately to the board as well.
Yeah, the other 2 in terms of the licensing and that's okay. It could be subject to that not being transferred. But I just didn't know how that would work in terms of being named as an establishment owner as opposed to the real estate. Now, Renee, I'm sorry, but there was a couple of edits throughout this that we talked about that you said you were going to take up after you went through it once, so I didn't want to stop you.
I'm sorry?
There were a couple of edits that you said you were going to be making that haven't been made yet, but you said you were going to take that up after you went through it once. I didn't raise it while you were going through it. The question is some adult use language in there that doesn't belong in there.
Yep, yeah, that was one of the ones I was going to mention at the end. So, and any reference to adult use we did strike out. So we're just waiting to hear back from town council on that.
Okay, there were a couple of others, but I'll wait till the end. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it's in the preamble too for the warrant as well. It says adult use medical marijuana, so we would need to make that change too. Okay, so the next section, section 5, talks about just the establishment of the MTC notifying the zoning enforcement officer and the special permit granting authority within 48 hours of a lapse cessation or discontinuance or expiration of revocation. Sorry. So these are all under the reporting requirements. I think I had one that I specifically wanted to mention. Let me just look. I think this last one here, in respect to the marijuana establishment or the MTC, I know this has come up on some other projects that have come before the town, but they are required to post with the town treasurer a bond or other form of financial security in respect to covering the cost of the town removing the materials, equipment, or other paraphernalia if the applicant fails to do so. So that was one item I did highlight to mention here because I know it's been a question on other projects that have come before the town. So the special permit procedure, again, this just outlines permit procedure. A lot of this refers back to the Cannabis Control Commission in respect to the documentation that needs to be submitted with an application. So again, we highlighted that they'll process in the order that they're filed, that it's up to the approval of the special permit for any establishment or MTCs up to the discretion of the planning board who make its determination based on compliance with the standards and intent of the bylaw. A couple of things that you'll see here in respect to the information that they have to provide. Most of these, again, are in line with what they're providing to the Cannabis Control Commission, but the name and address of each owner or operator of the marijuana establishment or the MTC, a copy of the approved host community agreement that would be, again, signed by the Board of Selectmen, copy of their provisional license, proof of liability insurance, evidence that the applicant has site control and right to use the site for marijuana establishment or MTC, and then notarized statement signed by the marijuana establishment or MTC organization CEO and corporate attorney disclosing all persons and entities having direct or indirect control. Again, this goes back to state requirements. The detailed floor plan of the premises for the proposed facility, detailed site plans, and it goes through. I think that this is pretty standard, Paul, and please correct me. The compliance with the requirements for parking, loading, convenience and safety for vehicular and pedestrian traffic, both on the site and off. So one of the things that we've talked about with the IDC and one of the things that we considered when we looked at the locations in the overlay district was whether or not there would be specific traffic issues. So if they weren't able to queue their customers appropriately, or if a parking lot wasn't large enough, those are a couple of things that we had talked about. So those are identified within here, as well as for a traffic impact study, which is a little bit lower. So it talks about the adequacy to the arrangement and number of parking and loading spaces in relation to the proposed use of the premises, design and appearance of the building structures, freestanding signs, screening and landscaping, adequacy of the water supply, detail showing the exterior proposed security measures. And these are a bit different too when you start talking about cultivations. Some of the security measures are very specific from an outdoor cultivation facility, which I would anticipate we're less likely to see in New England just because of the weather here. And then the last item there is the signage being proposed for this facility. It continues on to talk about the description of the security measures, employee security policies, copy of emergency procedures, copy of the policies and procedures for patient or personal caregiver home delivery approved by the commission, copy of the policies, procedures for transfer, acquisition, or sale of marijuana between the establishments or the MTCs approved by the commission, copy of proposed waste disposal procedures. And here again, as I mentioned, the pedestrian vehicle traffic impact study. And that certainly has been a discussion point as we've been going through here, not only with the applicants, but internally with the IDC as well as the planning board. Traffic's certainly something that we want to consider throughout the process. Number 15, as I mentioned, talks about additionally about odor, having an odor control plan detailing specific odor emitting activities or processes, the source of the odors, locations from which they're emitted from the facility. And then the administrative of odor control, including the maintenance of such controls. It gets into some of the written plans that are required relative to the marijuana establishments or the MTCs, operating procedures, marketing, advertising, waste disposal, transportation, delivery of marijuana or marijuana products, energy efficiency and conservation, security and alarms, and decommissioning of the marijuana establishment or MTC. The item B here just talks about the copies having to be provided to the Board of Selectmen, Building Department, Fire Department, Police Department, Board of Health, Conservation Commission, Highway Department, and the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners for the review of the application and so that they can submit their written recommendations. After the item C just talks about after notice and public hearing consideration of the application materials, the consultant reviews public comments and recommendations of other town boards and departments. The planning board may act upon such a permit. And then it just gives information here about the special permit conditions and noting that you shall impose conditions reasonably appropriate to improve site design, traffic flow, public safety, protect water quality, air quality, and significant environmental resources, preserve the character of the surrounding area, and otherwise serve the purposes of the article and the standards. And then I think this might be the last section, the findings, that in addition to the standard findings and criteria for a special permit or site plan approval, that the special permit granting authority must also find all of the following: that the marijuana establishment or MTC is consistent with and does not derogate from the purposes and intent of this bylaw and the other town's zoning bylaws, that the establishment or MTC facility is designed to minimize any adverse visual or economic impacts on abutters and other parties in interest, that the marijuana establishment or MTC facility demonstrates that it meets or exceeds all the permitting requirements of all applicable agencies within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that they'll be in compliance with all applicable state laws and regulations. Additionally, that the applicant has satisfied all the conditions and requirements of the bylaw and other applicable town bylaws, that the marijuana establishment or MTC facility provides adequate security measures to ensure that no individual participant will pose a direct threat to the health or safety of others, and that the storage and or location of cultivation is adequately secured on site or via delivery. And then lastly, that the marijuana establishment or MTC facility adequately addresses issues of traffic demand, circulation, flow, parking, and queuing, particular peak periods at the facility and its impact on neighboring uses. There's a section here on nuisances as well as severability. And then lastly, we added, I think Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, we added the conflicts part, correct? Completely?
I think we had that in pretty early on.
Okay. But just noting that in the case of inconsistencies between the bylaw and the Cannabis Control Commission regulations, that the term of the bylaw will govern unless there's an explicit direction otherwise. And that's the bylaw in a nutshell, 11 pages worth. Are there any questions? Let me see if there was anything. One thing to mention, Oren, as I said, there were some updates. We've talked about, and one of the things that we considered when we looked at the overlay district was specifically areas that were located on the main roadways, so Route 140 or 123, looking at the commercial and industrial areas. The one thing that we requested but was not in here that we have included for town council's review is noting that primary access must be established off of the main roadway. And so this would ensure if there's a parcel that, even if that parcel is quite far, but there's what I'll call like a back way in, and it's through a residential area, that would not be allowed. It must be through the main roadway. So that's one change that we highlighted for town council's comment. And I think that those might be it.
Just to reiterate, we're going to have some questions from the board, and then we'll open it to the public. Okay. So I think, Oren, you had some questions.
Yeah, hold on a second. Stuff on this. Anything showing up for my screen, my computer? Yeah. Renee, a couple of things that we talked about that I thought you were going to be addressed, that you said, I thought you said was going to be addressed or you're going to need to. Again, the adult use, there's several places where you reference the adult use, which really isn't being a part of this.
Right. The adult use from the preamble, I think it is in 5 or 6 areas that are going to be removed. There's also an update in the establishment section that talks about the any MTCs or marijuana establishments shall be permitted in the marijuana overlay district, and we added on subject to the limitations imposed by the bylaw. That again is a question for council too on whether or not it should say bylaw or special permit.
In the use regulations, in that second reference to the social consumption, we're just going to modify that so it's going to read social consumption marijuana establishment.
Yeah, it's actually social consumption establishments of any kind.
Okay, so you're taking marijuana, before you had marijuana establishment, comma, social consumption, you're taking that out.
Yeah, and that's just for clarity. That's no material change there. I'll go back to that section. Go ahead, Denise.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's correct. It's just social consumption establishments, which is already defined under the CCC.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you have anything further, Oren?
No, well, are we just raising general questions at this point?
Yeah, from the board, yeah.
Noticed for the first time some materials that was provided by, Gene, on the issue of odor, and I'm just curious, I really hadn't, when I was reviewing this, hadn't really contemplated that as an issue. In as much as we're now establishing establishments as being overall, including everything. Is there any benefit to taking a look at where odor might be a particular issue as it might abut other residential uses? Or is there anything else that the committee might want to recommend to enhance the concern over odor in terms of dealing with the bylaw? I know we can take it up in our decision, but certainly I'm not sure myself how much of an issue it is. It sounds like it might be one, and it's one that I know we don't have any bylaws themselves making it difficult to control odors. So I don't know, in absence of something in the bylaw itself, whether or not we have the tools we would need to make sure it's not an issue.
So, go ahead, Denise Sue. She wants to say something. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the requirements under the special permit was an odor control plan. Number 15, which details the specific odor emitting activities or processes being conducted on site, source of those odors, location from which they're emitting from the facility, frequency of the odor emitting activities, duration of odor emitting activities, and the administrative of odor control, including maintenance of such controls. So we did accommodate that in the special permit requirements.
And Orin, I just put up on the screen too. So we reviewed the information that she sent, and based on what was in the bylaw, and then also we have a section within the host community agreement on odor control technology. We felt that it was adequately represented. Certainly, we're willing to take another look at that if you feel otherwise.
Well, that's the first time I really thought of the issue. I started off approaching this looking at the retail use, and certainly where that's located in those spots were fine. And I also understand that some of these people needed cultivation as well as perhaps retail, but I really wasn't looking at the maps as well as to where those would abut residential property and how that might impact them. I think in looking at the map and that, I really hadn't taken that into account. I'm not sure, just questioning whether that's worth another look in terms of that impact.
There's also language, or under the physical requirements, that say that there's no odor from marijuana or its processing to be detected by a person with an unimpaired and otherwise normal sense of smell at the exterior of the medical marijuana business or any adjoining use or property. Such evaluation should be made by the building inspector or his or her designee. So that would address more closely your residential area concern, right?
I'm concerned, and I found it, I think the same is true with noise. We can put those things in it. We have the right to inspect it. We have the right to question it. The enforceability of it becomes problematic in terms of, okay, you have to clean the carbon filters, and if you don't clean them, you have to go out again and ask them to clean them again, which means in those 2-week periods between you have the building inspector going out there and then cleaning it, somebody's going to be affected by the odor. So we could put all that in there. We have in the past. And I don't know that the enforcement provisions we have make it suffice in terms of what the damage might be. And again, I don't know what it is. I just read those things for the first time, and I just raised that and just questioned is that whether or not we need to take some further limitation to make sure that that's not an issue, and whether or not that's. I haven't looked at the rest of the way the map has been laid out, whether or not. There's a lot of those situations where they abut immediately to residential, where that could be a problem. Maybe it doesn't. I just really never looked at that, and I don't know whether it's worthwhile taking another look to make sure that those places that would most likely be cultivation and manufacture don't immediately abut residential, where you don't have this tug of war as to, well, did you clean the filters? Didn't you clean the filters? Come back next week to see if I did. And in the meantime, someone's being adversely impacted by it.
Mm-hmm. And I think those are good points. And, again, like through the language within the HCA that we reviewed as well, right? It talks about how many complaints that we would receive, what the companies required to do, and then saying that we have, we have the authority and the jurisdiction to enforce any applicable state laws or regulations. Now, again, if we wanted to further that within the bylaw, I think we certainly could. So we can take that back again, Orin, and look at it. I know that she had sent us quite a bit of information in respect to that, and we felt that we were covered with these.
Well, perhaps maybe not even in the bylaw, because I think your approach is a good one in terms of identifying by way of map where it is. That really solved a lot of the problems that we otherwise would have. And what we're suggesting is whether we we bifurcate something like retail use or cultivation use or manufacturing use and look at those separately to make sure that those aren't adjacent to, eliminate that where it's immediately adjacent to residential use. Or put in, a bigger setback. And I have no idea how much it takes to dissipate any kind of odor. But look at it that holistically to make it so it doesn't happen as opposed to saying it shouldn't happen. I just don't know how effective that kind of language is in terms of being able to be implemented.
Right. And I think if you remember from our first conversation we had, like one of the things that we have to take into effect is that, when we think of cultivation, it's not always going to be, the 100,000 square foot cultivator that wants to be in there. So, it's one of the reasons why we modified the language about a marijuana establishment being within 500 feet of a marijuana establishment, because there may be some owners who have multiple uses. So they have cultivation, they have a retail shop out front or manufacturing in there. And, we've talked to some folks, I specifically have talked to some folks where they're literally looking for 2,000 square feet to have a small cultivation area that, they would then manufacture and provide to other retailers. So it's, while I understand that, like what we need to make sure is that based on those various conditions, that the planning board has the ability to make the decision that's appropriate for the criteria in front of it, because I don't think that we can plan for a smaller shop and then a larger shop. I mean, I can tell you, and again, right, we have to think about long term. When we did talk to a cultivator, and they're not looking to go into these commercial areas. Like they want to be buried back in an industrial area where there's not a lot of traffic, where they can do their business. But that's not to say that would be the case throughout the future. So I mean, we certainly need to make sure that we're comfortable with the language that we have within the HCA and the bylaw, so that we feel that we have the appropriate recourse if we need to enforce it.
Renee, if I could just also speak up for a second. I think it's important that they not be a nuisance. Odor should not be a nuisance to not just residents, but other commercial establishments as well. So we shouldn't just be solely focused on nuisance by the residents, from the residents.
Agree. So, or we'll take that away, and then we'll look through to see if there's some stronger language that we can put in place.
All right, or just whether or not you want different language for manufacturing and cultivation that would address that a little bit more. I agree with Laura that commercial people may have that same issue. You don't, if you're doing a restaurant and you have odors that are coming out right next to you, so you're not going to eat. So that's the only thing I'm thinking of. I question, no matter how strongly that language can be, the enforcement has a gap, and that gap just is natural in most of these things that we're looking at. And if we can map them away from the situations that we think are problematic, then maybe that's the solution. So.
I appreciate that. Excellent. Thank you, Warren.
Are any further questions from the board?
Are you going to go over those maps separately, Mary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Steve, do you want to open it to public, or do you want me to review the maps first?
Let's give the board another second, just in case they had to unmute.
Sure.
Anyone on the board have any questions? No? Okay. So now, oh, who was that? I'm sorry.
No, it was Scott. I just said, no, I'm all good.
Okay.
Just to let you know, we're still here, Steve.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the public. Anyone from the public have questions on this portion here?
This is Greg Vincent, 23 Reservoir Street. I had a question on the distances from the educational. Would that also include daycares?
No, the state guidelines is in respect to K through 12.
So if there's a daycare next door, that could be a possibility?
So we could have liquor stores next to them today too, right? So I guess what is it we're trying to prevent?
I don't know, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people, so that's why I brought it up, you know. Because I think when I talked to you, Renee, there was, on Saturday, it was at the, Roach Plaza there, the old video stores. There was a company going in there that was like a romper room, a child activity place.
Yep, like tumblebeans or something.
Yeah, that's what it was. So if a business were to want to move into that plaza, they would have to be 500 feet away from that.
No, because it's not an educational, it's not a K through 12 facility. So it's very specific in it being a school facility.
Mm.
You know, and one of the reasons and one of the things that we've considered, because that's come up, you know, one of the areas that is zoned, part of the overlay is up by 495-123 where Personal Best Karate is, and there's a daycare center in there. You know, and I think Denise probably talks to this better than I do, but you know, today it's a daycare center, tomorrow it may not be a daycare center. So, you know, it's again, one of those things, I mean, and I think of it from the respect of what are the controls that we have in place? So if you think of a retail dispensary, one, we have the control that we're limiting it at this time to just 2 licenses. Secondly, while not part of this hearing, but there's an application process that retailers will have to go through as well. And then those who are selected by the subcommittee would go in front of the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Selectmen has to agree, essentially, or enter into the host community agreement, you know, and that's all before it goes to the planning board. And so the planning board, again, like, you know, we're looking at different things. I mean, you always look at location. There's a public hearing that has to happen from the applicant based on the location to solicit feedback. And I think, you know, with the multiple steps in the process, that if it's something where we determine that there's a commercial property there that isn't within the character of the town to have a retail dispensary there, we have the ability to not move forward with that applicant.
Okay, very good. Sounds like you got it covered now.
Hope so. We tried. The team has worked tirelessly to, you know, make sure that we're doing the right thing for the town and you know, trying to improve the tax base and the revenue that we have here as well.
Yeah, I was very impressed with our conversation on Saturday.
Thank you.
And then my email from Paul today was good news.
Oh, excellent.
Renee?
Hi, Peter.
Yes, the video store you're talking about, that was All-Star Video, which opened on Saturday, November 10th, 1990.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Appreciate that.
Hi, Kelly Hallisey, 37 Precourt Lane.
Hi, Kelly. Go ahead.
Hi, okay. So I spoke with you as well about the daycare situation, and I would just hope that the town would take all of that and everything around it into consideration when they're allowing a business of that nature to come in. Yes, there are liquor stores next to schools and daycares, but if there's going to be odor, that's another problem. I didn't even think of that. But I was just thinking of the traffic. One location is 50 Pleasant Street, and that is Pleasant Street. It's not on 123 or 140. So if that location was chosen, would you block off the entrance on Pleasant Street and just make it accessible from 123?
The requirement in the bylaw is that it would have, the primary entrance would have to be for vehicular traffic on 123.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And that's a parcel that we talked about. It's near Oasis, I believe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, Paula Foss from 16 Mansfield Ave. What could be the saturation? I wasn't really clear with the percentages. What's the possibility right now of how many establishments could be in Norton?
So right now it's at 2.
Okay.
As Joe was saying, if our population exceeded 20,000, and we would have to be, and IDC, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would have to have 2 additional liquor licenses for that 2 to change to a 3, because it's based on 20%.
Okay, and it could also be established near a college because it's only 12?
So the only college that I believe is here is Wheaton, and the overlay does not extend near Wheaton.
Okay, and I just had a question when we get to the overlay map, so I'd be interested in that. And also wanted to just support the gentleman who suggested larger boundaries or setbacks for some of the odor control. I think that would be important language.
Okay, great,
Madam
thank you.
Chairman, could you just tell me who that was again, please?
That's Paula Foss from 16 Mansfield Avenue.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
Hi, Renee, this is Joe again. And this goes back to issue that Norton raised about the special permit. And I'm just thinking out loud, I really don't have a suggestion, but let me just kind of elevate this to a higher level in terms of the process if I want to be in the marijuana business. I need to get a license from the Cannabis Control Commission. So that makes me a licensee. I have no location yet. I have no host community agreement. My next step is to negotiate a host community agreement with the municipality. And as part of that, I assume that the municipality is going to want to know where in town you're going to locate. And even though they haven't gone through the permitting process with the planning board, that probably would be a general idea. This is where I'm going to go, because I believe the host community agreement requires some type of evidence of ownership or control of the premises.
Correct.
So this next boils down to the transferability or the lack thereof of the special permit issued by the planning board. And the issue that the situation that raises, I go in the business, I go through the entire process. We've located on 123, wherever we've located. 5 years, 4 years down the road, I decide I want to get out of the business and sell. What is the advantage or disadvantage of having that special permit, which is typically running with the land? Why wouldn't the special permit run with the land as opposed to the owner or licensee, so that I can sell to another licensee and the special permitting process doesn't have to start all over?
So Joe, I think that's a great question. I think town council would have a better answer, but the bottom line is that the host community agreement is with the applicant. It's not with the land. The license from the Cannabis Control Commission is with the applicant. It can't be transferred. If somebody wanted to come in there, they would already have to have engaged in another HCA with us, and they would have to have a license from the CCC.
Well, I understand that, but if I've already established that if I've built the building or whatever it is that I'm using, I've built the building, I've gone through the special permitting process. Arguably, the community is comfortable with that location. Why would I force someone who is now either going to buy my business to start the process all over again and notify others and the like when that's already been established some years ago through this process? Again, I'm not advocating one way or another, but
So I think I can answer that somewhat simply. If we have a retail establishment and they are going to leave town, what would happen from the perspective of another one coming in is we would open submissions for the application process. So applicants, whether it be that particular applicant or any other that were interested in coming to Norton, would go through the same process from the beginning, and we would do that to make sure that we review the necessary documentation that we want to review. We want to make sure that they're going to be a good partner in the community, that they're going to be, from a financial perspective, that we believe that they're sustainable. And, it's great. Somebody might want to just give their license away, but, part of the review process is really for us to make sure that we're entering into the best potential situation that we can, right? And again, that subcommittee is put together to provide recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Selectmen would ultimately negotiate the HCA.
But again, I understand both at the licensing standpoint, at the Cannabis Control Commission, the host community agreement, but why make this new individual go through the special permitting process all over again, when typically the special permitting process is dealing with a physical location, which in this case would already have been established?
I mean, I don't know that we would want to say that you wouldn't want to look at that, because while the location is there, I mean, you still want to make sure that the security measures are the same, that the floor plan's the same, that their operating procedures, I mean, there's so much more than just the physical location.
Well, but again, if the special permit runs with the land, as typically it does, all those conditions would apply to the new occupant. And again, I'm not advocating one or another. It's just that in certainly the most comparable scenario is that of a liquor licensee. And if I buy a pre-existing restaurant, I don't have to go through the special permitting process all over again if I'm making no physical changes to the property. And I don't know that not allowing for that possibility in this case is beneficial or not. Again, I'm just raising it to raise it.
Yeah, I think we can talk to town council about that. I mean, there might be something within the CCC that limits that. I believe it is within the CCC that limits that. Denise, I saw you went off of mute.
I was just going to say, I believe it's a limitation based on the CCC, but I'm having a hard time putting my hands on the email from town council right now, but I believe you did ask that question already.
I would take it that. To answer your question, what would happen is, going up on what Joe was saying, they could come in for amendment. Let's say they had different procedures, so they wanted to remodel the store in some way. They could come with an amendment to their special permit, which if it's not material, doesn't even require a hearing. If it's material, it would require a hearing. And that would just seems more logical from our perspective of what we do and how we do it.
I mean, we can ask. I mean, you know, I know that a license from the CCC can't be transferred, right? So that applicant is going through the same process that they would have to with the CCC. If we want to be, you know, institute a different process for somebody in the same location, I mean, it's our bylaw, we potentially can. I don't know, one, if we're able to based on the Cannabis Control Commission, and two, I want to look more detailed at the things that we're looking at. I can tell you from the perspective of the IDC and what we talked about from the application process would be open, and it would be open to any retail dispensary coming into town, and we would have another review process, and that review process would go to the Board of Selectmen. So, you know, again, you may then say, okay, whoever that is, if they're going in the same location, they wouldn't have to go through a special permitting process. You know, we'll have to get that advice from town council, certainly.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback because it actually makes it easier on the applicant. And I made a note to ask town council more specifically, or I like your comment about amending the special permit, because I think we asked about, you know, applying, if they had to apply for a new special permit, and the answer was yes, but I don't think we asked specifically about amending the existing one. So we'll ask a little bit more targeted question.
And I think we asked about the term of it too, right? Because the term runs with the HCA.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a limit in there as well.
I was also just thinking in terms of if it were to switch from a retail establishment to manufacturing and vice versa, there would be probably some differing requirements.
The special permit would be identifying the type of use. So if they were changing it from a retail establishment to a manufacturing, there would be a special permit. It's a special permit.
And there are safety agreements in the host agreement. There are safety nets with the host agreement and so forth. So this would put less burden on the business owner.
Mm-hmm. We'll ask the question. There's quite a bit to the regulations within the CCC, so certainly not. It's not something that we shouldn't consider if we can make the process easier. Are there any other questions? Okay, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I'll go through the overlay.
Yeah, go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I think I'm still sharing this, so.
And just so everyone knows, we'll do the same process. You'll go through the overlay. We'll have any questions from the board, and then we'll open it up to the public.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Or just one person tell me if you can see my screen?
Odor control.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see it.
Odor control.
Renee, you're still showing odor control technology page.
Okay. let me, I have to click resume here. Let me close that. Okay, how about now?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great, thank you guys. Okay, so as mentioned, we have the marijuana overlay district. This first slide here shows all of Norton, and it shows the zones. One of the things I mentioned in the beginning is we've asked for this water resource protection district, which is also diagonal on display, to be removed, so that we're only seeing the marijuana overlay, so that it's easier for folks looking at this to understand what areas are within that designation. So again, we broke these into 5 sections. East Main Street Business Parks, which is by 123 and 495. We have Norton Commerce Center, which is down by Taunton and the Bay Road area. And then the industrial zones in South Norton, the business and industrial zones in Chartley, and then the Route 140 North, which is up by the Xfinity Center. Okay, so we'll go through, and again, when you think about this, the 2 conditions have to apply. One, that the overlay has to be specific to the parcel, and the underlying zoning district has to be in line with either village commercial, or industrial. So this is the East Main Street Business Parks. You'll see from our zoning area that not everything here that is commercial or industrial is within the overlay. Again, that's intentional. One of the things that we did literally for the IDC is we went through parcel to parcel. You know, there's always been some question into why things were zoned particular ways. You know, this area right here is actually Red Mill Village, so it's a large residential area, but yet it's sitting as a commercial zone. So we took the time to go through each parcel. Again, you know, there are some legal requirements that we have to maintain to make sure that we're not doing spot zoning, but we wanted to be fair in respect to what areas, what uses were within that area, and making sure that we were making the right decisions within the character of the town. So all the purple areas are industrial here. These were previously within the 2017 bylaw as being able to have a marijuana establishment. This was added. This is the section. This is the Dunkin' Donuts, the liquor store, and then this is the area behind that has like Pizza Time and Personal Best. Okay, on the, whoops, I went two clicks here. The next section is the Norton Commerce Center. So this is a section down by Taunton and Bay Road. You'll see this is all industrial, and all of this area was currently within the bylaw, and it remains within the marijuana overlay district. So there were no changes there. The second area, this is industrial zones in South Norton. So this was a little different. You'll see there are some areas here. Let me see if I can zoom in. Some parcels here. When we looked at this, it was, somebody remind me, this is Winslow Farms, correct? Is this the area of Winslow Farms? My IDC folks?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks, Laura. So when we looked at this, we were looking at what's currently industrial. Does it make sense? You'll see in this section that there are some areas that are zoned industrial that are not included in the overlay. This is Winslow Farms specifically. This area right here actually has 3 houses that are there, but it's zoned industrial. So we did not include that within the overlay. We stayed over here by the main roadways. This area was industrial. We kept it within the overlay. And then as we move over here, there's a section, let me look at this I just have to get my bearings on this. There's a section here, let me move my screen, that you'll see is zoned industrial that is not included. And then you'll see some of the split parcels, right? We talked about the split parcels before. So again, it has to match both the overlay as well as the zone under it. This section, I'm drawing a blank on what this section was and why it was not industrial.
It was just a split parcel.
Yeah, it's
that's
the
railroad tracks.
Yeah. So sometimes you see it and it looks quite funny. One of the things that we asked for as well is a satellite view so that we could see the overlay on a satellite and have some buildings and locations when you're looking at the map. You'll see here as well, we identify these parcels, but you'll see they have the split parcel here too. So while the overlay is showing more areas, the section of industrial is really the only place where a marijuana establishment can be located.
That's right along the track, what you're looking at.
I'm sorry?
That's where the tracks cross John B. Scott, where you are. You don't have the overlay, but people that are familiar with the area, that's right where the tracks cross John B. Scott.
Mm-hmm. Additionally, you'll see in this section here, so this is 123 proceeding out of town. I think there's another better picture of this, but I want to highlight this. So these are areas, industrial areas, as well as commercial areas. They are not within the overlay. This is actually within the 500 feet of a school, so you'll see they're not included. Similarly, this particular parcel right here is within 500 feet, so this section is not included in the overlay. So the overlay is specific to the locations, the parcels that are outside that 500-foot perimeter. And then you have some split zoning in here. It looks like commercial and industrial in that area. Okay. On to the next, actually, let me show this because this is on here. Oh, I'll show it in a later view. But just wanted to mention, you'll see there's a commercial area here, there's an industrial area here. Again, we didn't select those as being in the overlay based on location, what was in the areas, things like that. We actually did drive-bys in some cases as we were determining the parcels for this. Here's that specific area that we were just looking at where the split parcels are. So this is 123 heading out of town. And this is the section here where Kelly was talking about. So this is the would be the entranceway into the parcel off of 123. But again, there's that the 500 foot. So this particular parcel here, although it is zoned industrial, would not be included because the parcel itself abuts the 500 foot perimeter. Oh, I'm sorry too, I didn't mention this is the industrial and business zones in Chartley, the particular segment for this map.
You missed the first map.
Did I?
You did. The 140 north.
Yeah, I know. Was it the first?
Yeah, you jumped over it.
Oh, there we go. I even mentioned, I think I jumped it, and I jumped it twice. I was going to say that I know I'm missing one. Okay, so this is the section here, Mansfield. This is 140 coming down. You'll see a variety of zoning. So you have commercial closest to the highway, and then it goes into village commercial. So these areas, again, one of the things that we considered for the zoning was, you know, what does it use? Like 140 is really a primary commercial zone proceeding through, you know, that entire section. There are areas here, you know, as well, like Mass Gas is down here. So this is the corner of Reservoir Street and 140, just for a frame of reference. These areas on here are, when you look at it from here, this is actually, when you select the parcel, this is the golf course. This is the land for the golf course with access from 140, and then the remaining areas. So you'll see there are quite a bit of areas in here that are zoned commercial. This area was actually, I believe this is Smith Street. This was changed in the town meeting, but it does show currently on the map as commercial, but is not within the overlay. So again, just those areas focused on primary access from 140. Okay, Laura, did I skip anything else?
No, I think you got them all.
Okay. My apologies for that, for the jump.
Okay.
Yes.
Renee, do you mind if I just do the explanation on the changes that we need to make on the...
Oh, this part?
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you could just hover over those two. So for the board, I needed to update you just on something I confirmed with town council today. Again, in my email to you, I mentioned that these two parcels that when in 2017, when they were rezoned, we have confirmed that actually those two parcels actually are split zoned. So you're looking, I will have to show you the map, but there's that should not have been rezoned all to village commercial, and there's a portion along Mansfield that was correctly rezoned to village commercial, but on the reservoir side, it's I believe it's R60. So that should remain R60. So the marijuana overlay district will need to be modified to reflect that. I will be in touch with SERPID, the Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District, who manages our map, to have them updated. Additionally, those parcels, if you could just move it up to those three parcels, thank you. This doesn't affect the overlay district because as you can see, it's not in it, but those were also, not rezoned to village commercial, and those should be go to residential 60. So, when you see this map again, it'll have those corrections on it.
And hey, Paul, is it possible, can we ask Serped to update this? Like, this was what was just changed in the last town meeting to residential? I think that was the only. Can they update that at the same time, just so we have more accurate maps?
That Smith Street,
Yes.
that wasn't changed to, well, I'm sorry, did you say residential?
I thought it was, did it go village commercial?
It went to village commercial.
Village commercial, yeah.
So Paul, I just want to make sure that I understood.
Yeah, okay. I will ask Serpent to, I have asked them to do that. It's not happened yet, so I will.
Maybe they did. I mean, these are from February as well. So maybe they have made that change, but I figure for.
I've requested it of them, so that's a great catch. So.
Yeah, that was requested before February, I think.
Yeah, that was requested after the Attorney General approved the town meeting warrants from the October meeting.
So Paul, just so I understand the change on this village commercial section to the right that the cursor is over right now, there's some portion of those lots that will remain village commercial, but the remaining part of it is R60. So does that have any impact on the overlay, and that we would still have the overlay there, just that the buildings could only be in the village commercial portion?
Right, correct.
Okay.
So, I mean, we could ask them just to redraw the overlay district just to mirror, if they can, but to mirror the boundary.
Okay.
And if they can't, then obviously if it's in R60, you can't put any portion of a marijuana facility on it. So, but we'll try to get them to do it just so it's very clear.
Thank you, Paul, for that update.
Okay, so do you want to take some questions from the board now, if there are any? Anyone on the planning board have questions on these maps?
I have a question, I don't know if it's for Paul or Renee. Are any of these, are we splitting up any parcels? And if we do we have any requirement to survey them?
Orin, that's a great question. In fact, Mr. Vincent and I, we've had some emails about that. As you saw from when Renee was showing the maps, particularly around Attleboro, the Charlie area, this problem exists all over town where zoning was split, and it's a legacy of having a hand-drawn map that didn't have parcels on them. Right, this is a great example. Right, some parcels you can see have these split zones, so it's going to be an issue that we need to start looking at some point about having legal descriptions that can clearly show where that line is, because it could be arbitrary if we have a proposal in this area. It's not, this map doesn't tell you the boundary, and it's an issue that we have to figure out how we prioritize it. But there are many towns that will have legal descriptions for all their zoning, which could help address it. But that's something that we would have to budget and put forward at town meeting. But I would say, as a practice, we should always try to avoid splitting zoning along in a parcel, if at all possible.
Renee, in those cases where you split it up, was there any topography or certain elements that we could rely on in terms of us looking at that when someone comes to us? Or some criteria you use that?
I mean, the criteria is that it has to have the overlay and it has to fall into industrial, village, commercial, or commercial. Right, so if this, for example, were residential, right? I mean, they would have to evidence that they're within the appropriate zone. You know, like if they want to put an establishment here, it's not zoned appropriately because it has to meet both criteria. So, and that, you know, and that was a struggle for us too. Obviously, that's why we put in the condition that had to meet both, not only from the underlying zone, but also the overlay. And the one thing too that we considered, like with the overlay, you know, as we make improvements. So let me I think this is probably a good example here. You know, we have right here this industrial property. This is the Reed and Barton area, the former Reed and Barton area. And you'll see we just have this little block of industrial sitting within a whole bunch of residential. So right now, this section is actually within the rights. If somebody wanted to have a marijuana establishment here, they could have an establishment because we have it zoned industrial. We did not include this in the overlay because we didn't feel it met the character. I mean, this is within a residential area. And, you know, some of the applicants that we talked to as well, I mean, you know, they're not looking to go into a residential area or what I'll say, like, cause a disturbance, right? Like it needs to be viable and sustainable for them as well. So they're really looking at, from a retail perspective, being in a commercial area, right? A commercial or an industrial area. Similarly, you know, when we've talked to the other folks who they're looking more for like a warehouse type, they're not looking to be in these big commercial areas. They're looking to be buried back into an industrial area. So, you know, having the conversations and really, it was really us learning about the different types of businesses that we can have so that when we went through the overlay, you know, we were comfortable with that. But we were intentional. I mean, this one here was close to a school, but this one we specifically did not include because we just didn't feel it was appropriate for the town. But I think there was a question earlier about Wheaton. I think this might actually be within 500 feet of a Wheaton parcel. Are there any other questions from the board?
Well, okay, so let's open it up to anyone from the public that would like to ask questions.
Hello, Greg Vincent, 23 Reservoir Street. If we could zoom back to the 140 and the intersection of Reservoir. Okay, yes, that property. That triangular, let me give you a little history. I worked with first Becky and then Tabitha, who replaced Becky, on getting the whole village commercial zoning right. And one of the researches I did was to find out when that property across the street from my house, owned by Wheaton, that triangular property, was made commercial. Because I read every single town meeting from 2016 back to 1998, and I could not find evidence of when that was made commercial. Because if you go to the assessors, even today, you go online to the Norton assessors, it calls that property out as R40. So everybody built houses along that stretch got duped into believing that was R40 property all along there. Aside from the case, I did find evidence, and Tabitha helped me find it all. I put in an official request to find it, and we went back to 1978, and this is where you get all the split zoning, where it was a blanket zoning of, in some places, 350 feet, in other places, 450 feet along 140, and again along 123. That's where you get the split zoning on the other side of town. That's how they originally became commercial. And it's notified on additional maps, and I gave Paul the list, 82, 84, and they've always been that. So, and Tabitha went to the town meeting in the spring of 2017, to change commercial to village commercial. Well, all the commercial, existing commercial, was changed to village commercial, but split zone, as it was drawn out, commercial in the late 70s. So that triangular piece of property is only village commercial 350 feet in. At its widest point, it's 565 feet. The same thing with the Fernandez property on Mansfield Ave there. That opens up into that big 18-acre lot. You lose pretty much 2/3 of that property. It's still residential. And a good section of that Wheaton property, the triangular, that's still residential. So you can't have, you can still draw the marijuana overlay, but not over a residential area. And there's additional properties across the street too, but I think some of them were changed to commercial, although they allowed the woman who owns the second property in there to build a house in 2004 because she thought it was residential. She's since put the house up for sale because she doesn't know what to do. Her property is commercial and she's got a house on it that she, with an indoor pool and everything. She spent a lot of money on it. And of course, the big Wheaton, this is not part of the overlay, but the big Wheaton property on Reservoir Street and the small Fernandez property adjacent to the other Fernandez property, those were never, ever commercial. Those are still residential. They were excluded from the 2017 town meeting. There was a 2016, a hearing in September, which I was heavily involved in, and we had 350 people at that planning board meeting at the school, and it did not make it onto the fall 2016 because of some errors and omissions. They got thrown out. But yeah, if you look through the split zoning all through Norton, it's like they said, the railroad tracks, the other end of town, this area, even further up, there is a lot of split zoning. And when we did that big, huge village commercial change to the commercial properties, it was only for what was existing commercial. And you have to go back to these old zoning maps, which I have e-size copies of. I've offered Paul to, he's welcome to them, that show all those areas. And I have stuff that Tabitha gave me concerning the verbiage and everything else that I would gladly help Paul with. And I appreciate all the work Paul's put into it. He's been fantastic. He recognized some of the things that I have said. And if you need support from me, Paul, I'm here for you. I'm not at all against the marijuana overlay. This town needs business. And it needs, we need to get more people in the town. But once again, it would not be fair to the owners of the split property if, they own the property and all of a sudden they can't, or if somebody comes in there to buy the property and then finds out it's split and they can't build anything on it. So it goes both ways. It could help the original owner, or it could help somebody interested in building a business to know that property, like that Fernandez property, that looks very attractive. That big 18 acres and all that, but right where you got your cursor is where it stops. That whole big square is residential. Just the homestead, the Fernandez homestead right there on Mansfield is basically all there is. That's village commercial. The big Peterson property, that is commercial, and that is correct. Because that was changed back in 2006, I believe, to commercial. The one with all the water frontage. And I was talking to Renee, I had some big visions of that area. It's such a beautiful area, or could be. It was developed properly.
I agree. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'll stop for now.
Did the parcel actually include a portion of the water?
What was that, Orin? Do the parcels include a portion of the water?
Yeah.
According to this, yes.
Really?
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't think there's any regulation from the state about having a floating marijuana retail dispensary.
Okay.
Giving people ideas.
Yeah, we could be the first.
I like that.
You can only go around here. You cannot go into this area.
Maybe.
I want to go to that Concom meeting.
Sure, might
Yeah.
talk about an arena.
Wow.
Renee,
Yes, Peter.
this is a photo from the Norton Patriots from 8 August 24th, 1970, and this is a shot of 140 Mansfield Avenue near Wheaton College, and that spot was the library for many years until it moved to the current location in 1991, and this is a shot of 123 and 140 back when there was a blinking light until 1997.
Great, thanks, Peter.
Right?
Or did you have another question?
No, that was it. I thought it was a mistake.
Yeah, no.
Might you want to limit the overlay portion to the portion that's on land?
Well, I mean, that's the thing with selecting the parcels, right? And so that was our question about when we give them parcel IDs, it selects the entire parcel. I don't know what's involved with that. That would be a Paul question.
If you're splitting parcels, that might be a good opportunity to split one. Okay.
I don't know, put a big dock out there. It's an opportunity.
Okay.
Just grab the old maps and draw a line, 350.
We'll call you guys if we get the permit, ask them to put something on it.
Yeah.
What's
Well, I mean, according to this, it's not village commercial,
Yeah.
right? So if you guys can change that, then maybe we can get something on the water.
Okay, all right.
Is there anyone else from the public that has a question here?
I have a question on the 123 Attleboro side. My name's Mike McHugh at 357 Old Colony Road.
Hi, Mike, go ahead.
I'll wait till you get to the map there, miss.
I think I had that more. There we go.
So the way, okay, so on the upper hand side of 123 there's a triangular plot right to the left of your cursor right now. The one over to the left.
This one?
Nope.
This one.
So yes, that triangular one. So that there is a commercial storage facility. My parcel is the one immediately to the left of that, the long rectangle. Now, the way this map is drawn, the only industrial capability is the purple that's pictured below there. All of those storefronts are in what is currently right now commercial or village commercial. Would that have any, like, where all that purple is right now, as far as I'm concerned, is not buildable. It's too close to Chartley Pond or the watershed area for there and a lot of wooded area. But all of the business fronts and storefronts are in what is depicted as commercial right there, the top half of the purple and pink parcels.
Mm-hmm.
Would that have any impact, or are they able to build in the purple and use a longer driveway, for lack of a better term, to open that business?
So the overlay applies to these commercial properties, Mike? So everywhere where you see this diagonal, these are properties where they have to, it's twofold, right? It has to be within the overlay, which is a diagonal area, and then it has to be either industrial, commercial, or village commercial. So anywhere where you see this diagonal, there's potential opportunities for a marijuana establishment. I mean, if they wanted to go into the industrial, I mean, that would be part of the permitting process and conservation review on whether or not it was buildable. I mean, that would hold true for any of the areas.
Yeah.
So they could grow in the purple and sell in the orange.
Right.
Okay. So like what was the old time shop there, which is diagonally left to my parcel there, could essentially become a retail and cultivation site?
It could be, it has the potential to be any marijuana establishment, right? So it could be a retail dispensary, it could be cultivation, it could be manufacturing or transportation or distribution. The overlay allows for a marijuana establishment to go within those areas.
Including within any one of those parcels?
Yes. Where you see the diagonal, yes.
Okay. Now, obviously right now it's a little premature, but come town meeting time when this came down to a vote, as a residential abutter to that, I would assume that we would have some sort of say or input on the outcome.
I mean, yeah, it has to be voted on by residents, but certainly if you have an opinion that you'd like to share now.
I guess what I'm getting at is the whole top side of 123, my parcel and all the ones to the left of me are all currently residential. I understand.
Here?
Yep, I understand it's deeded as village commercial. The only exception is the larger rectangle to the left of your cursor that's kind of vertical. On the other side of the small triangle and then that smaller rectangle. But that larger rectangle is currently right now Mac and Walls.
Mm-hmm. So it's commercial, not village.
It is commercial. When we had purchased the property in 2012, it was village commercial, but I believe now it is all since changed. I don't know if it was 2016 or 17, but it is all commercial at this point. But those are all residential plots right now.
Yes.
Those are all myself and my neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we don't know what the character's going to look like of those properties, right, in 10, 20 years or whatever, but certainly that will be taken into consideration as it goes through the various stages of review to kind of whittle down which sites we're going to select as the ones we're going to sign the HCA with that could then go forward to special permitting process. So those will be some of the factors that we'll consider is what kind of other things are in the area where they're asking to locate, right?
Okay, fair enough.
And the special permitting process, they'd come before us and you have an opportunity then as well.
And,
Okay.
and Mike, there's, when an applicant selects a location, they're required to have a public session as well, based on that location. So that's part of the requirements through the state.
Okay, I apologize if you had already stated that. I wanted
that's okay.
clarification on it. But
Sure.
no, that's perfect. I understand. We'll patiently hurry up and wait, if you will.
And I think you'll find for the most part, a retailer is not going, if it's all residential in the area and it just happens to be zoned commercial, they're not going to want to be the one lot in between all the houses that's, a marijuana retailer. That's not what they're looking to do. So I don't think you're going to find that to be desirable for them to begin with.
Fair enough. I appreciate it. Thank you, Miss.
Yeah.
Greg Vincent, 23 Reservoir Street. One of the other things that anybody looking to permitting to do anything is to take into consideration the watershed preserve zones. Like reservoir and all that, that's zone 3 watershed. All that property, including the Mansfield property there, is a certain percentage, and I have to go back in your zone bylaws, a zone 3 watershed reserve, as a certain percentage of the total acreage cannot be touched. It can't be changed. It has to stay natural. That, along with the 100 feet within wetlands. But your own existing bylaws, there's a statement on the watershed reserve zones, and there's 3 zones in Norton. 1 is obviously by the Canoe River. 2 is in between, and 3 stretches all the way to the reservoir and around the reservoir. So I think I looked it up, that 12.3 acre piece of property triangular, I think you would lose 4 point something acres you cannot even touch. And that applies to a lot of the other properties. So that's maybe something else if an applicant comes, that they have to be pointed to.
Yeah, I think that's an issue all around the town for any business that's looked to come here.
Oh yeah,
Certainly.
my yard is underwater right now. The water table in there, I think I read somewhere we are the lowest point in Massachusetts.
I don't know.
My basement's underwater, so.
Yeah, I can dig a hole 1 foot and within 20 minutes it's filled up with water. Yeah. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
I'd like to say something. This is Bill Farrow from 16 Mansfield Avenue. After listening to Mr. Vincent's discussion about the triangular property there at the intersection of Reservoir Street and 140. And then the property next to it, it seems to me that there's quite a bit in favor of why you would not include that in the overlay district. And so I wanted, that property where your cursor is, Renee, that one, and then the one, I guess it's the Fernandez property, yeah, those two. From the various things that Mr. Vincent described, and also the idea that they sit right across the street from a whole bunch of residential property on the other side of Reservoir Street, I would make the suggestion that you would perhaps take those out of the overlay district. That's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, thanks. We can certainly take that into consideration. I mean, we have to look at specifically where that line gets drawn and whether or not it will render those lots, unusable. But like we mentioned a couple times already, like the way those lots are currently residential across the street today, they may not be in 10, 20 years. We don't know what that's going to look like. So
if I could add a little more. If you move your cursor to the large rectangular property across the street, a little bit to your right.
This one?
The next property, that's my property, the long rectangular one.
Here.
Yeah, you go up 1, 2, 3, 4 houses. That's mine right there.
Okay.
Now, if you were to draw the line from the property below me, draw a straight line diagonally, that's the line for residential / village commercial. Yes.
Right here.
Just like that, yep. And you continue through the Fernandez property until you get the Peterson property, right, which is commercial.
So I don't know what that, it's to Denise's point, it's hard to tell. I mean, we can visualize it here. I don't know what that is from a linear foot perspective, or if that would even be viable for any sort of a marijuana establishment to go there. So it's one of those things, again, it's, when you look at the corridor of 140, it's primarily commercial. Who's to say, as Denise said, that a residence that might be there now might sell for quite a bit of money because it's own village commercial and another business goes there. So I think first we have to see what that split looks like, and then have some conversation, not only to make sure that we're not spot zoning at that point, but then to see if it would even be something that's viable.
Yeah, I have the maps from the 70s, and I'm sure Tabitha was able to find them.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd have them there at Town Hall as well. And it shows 350 feet in from Mansfield Avenue. And just like it does on what we just looked at on 123, how it looks like they didn't care about what the parcel was. They just did a blanket zoning back then, a statement, that's all it was. It was a statement at a town meeting in 1978 that they were going to zone everything commercial 350 feet in from the road and be done with it. It didn't matter what the parcel was. And that's what you're finding all over town. That's what happened back then.
Right.
What I don't understand is back then they had commercial, they didn't have village commercial, obviously. And they had industrial, and they had an R1 and an R2. R1, you were allowed to have cows and pigs and whatever. and R2, and they changed all those zoning bylaws, was it in the 90s sometime, when they came up with the R40, 60, 80, and all that. But getting back to the issue of the assessors, and this would be the same for anybody looking to bring a business to Norton, they're going to go to the town hall, they're going to look up the assessor's data on the property they're interested in, and it's going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong. I mean, that Wheaton property, it's been commercial, I discovered, since the late 70s. Half of it, or a good part of it. But you go to the assessor's office, even tonight, you want to log in and go to the assessor's office, pull up the data card on that, and it says R40. You pull up the other Wheaton property, which is correct, that's R60. Fernandes properties are 60. So here you have is the assessor's data does not match the zoning maps in this town, and it's been that way for the longest time. In fact, when they started the database, they should have never entered R40 because it was already commercial.
And if I can interject,
Yeah.
the assessor's map is not the official zoning map. So
I know, but
right, no, right. I'm just clarifying, just going beyond that, Craig, because when you go to the assessor's map online, that's where you can find the zoning map now. And years ago, up until a couple years ago, you're correct, they put zoning on the assessors, but oftentimes it was incorrect.
correct.
They moved it, and now the digital version is up online. So
Well, that's good. 'Cause
when we make the change to these parcels here, that'll be reflected eventually on the assessor's map.
Oh, great. That'll be great. That's what I know Tabitha and I started to try to work on, and I got sidetracked and never finished helping her, and then I guess she moved on. But yeah, that was one of the very sore spots of 2017. 2016.
Well, it'd be nice to get it updated on here. And, again, I mean, right now I wouldn't see a change. I wouldn't anticipate a change. And I only say that because you look at some of these other parcels and they're very small, but that's, again, not to say that somebody doesn't come in and looks at combining some or having a different layout of a building. So I think our next step is first to get this information updated and then to take a look how that impacts the overlay specifically.
Yeah, Renee, I was going to echo that and say I don't anticipate us making a change because if the lot is not viable once we redraw that line, then that's up to the person who's looking for the land to make their determination, right? If they say the 300-foot frontage isn't enough for me to do anything with, and I can't, that lot's not good for me. Because like Renee has said a couple times, it's not just the overlay, right? It's the overlay and it has to be the underlying zoning underneath it. So it'd only be that area that's zoned village commercial and in the overlay.
Yeah, I mean, Wheaton has a tough piece of property there. It's 350 feet in, and it's back to residential. It's only commercial on the front side of it. It's more wetlands than the state map shows, because Wheaton had a wetland study done 3 years ago, and it actually is worse. And then it's in the Zone 3 aquifer district. So, my comment to Renee was we ought to give it to the town. Make a little park out of it where it is dry.
If you want to have that conversation with him, I can follow up afterwards.
I did have that conversation with somebody at Wheaton when we were having the meetings about the village center and what our plans were. That's when I told you about, my marina plans and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, great.
All right. Thank you so much, Renee, and everyone.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity again.
Okay, so looks like we're going to have another meeting on this, I believe. And so, Paul, what was the date you had mentioned before to continue to?
I believe May 19th.
Okay.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from today.
Does that work for you guys on the IDC?
It should. Is that a Tuesday?
Yeah.
You know what? I might have a conflict because the Board of Selectmen might be getting together. If we have the recommendations from the governor, I'll have to let you know though, Steve.
Okay.
It'll depend on whether or not town council is available.
So what's our, Paul, do you have your, I'm just pulling my calendar. We have the 26th as well, don't we?
Yes.
That might work a little better if, do you know what that schedule looks like?
At this point, you did continue Wading River Estates to the 26th.
Okay.
So that's one item on the agenda. And remember, they're asking to, they're hoping that you'll close the public hearing that night, so I don't know what level of discussion we'll have.
I think we'd be okay putting it on that night. Let me get just some quick input from the board, the rest of the planning board. What do you all think?
I think that'll be fine, especially because I think most likely we may end up looking to push it up further given a potential town meeting push.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so the 26th, we'll have to, sorry, we're going to continue this on the 26th, so we'll need a vote for this, right? Motion.
Yes, and a roll call.
Can everyone other than the planning board just mute for a second so we can do this? They're getting a lot of feedback. Thank you. So I'll need a motion in a second to continue to the 26th.
And we'll motion.
Scott will second.
All right, motion in a second to continue this to the 26th. Tim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Orin?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes, but, and I know we didn't have any discussion, my concern is if we, for whatever reason, stick to the June 8th meeting date, then we can't make any changes as a result of the hearing, because the warrant will have already been posted. So.
So the warrant has to be posted. I believe the date is May 22nd. So to Joe's point, he is correct. We, however, are marching to that date. So we would have that updated by that time. I don't know if that helps you at all.
That's my point, which is fine. If it's updated by then no changes can be made to the warrant, and then we run into that issue if there are changes on the floor. That much more confusing. But I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, that's if the June 8th goes forward, but we think that that's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a long yes, by the way.
Thank you. And Kevin?
I'll give you a short yes.
Thank you. I'll vote yes.
And I'm sorry, Chair.
Yes.
There's a person participating, Danielle Collins. Her audio's not working, but she did have a question. The question is could you tell us how how character is being considered next to St. Mary's Rectory, where the two houses are being considered? That's if St. Mary's on first 123. So Renee, want to?
I don't believe that the marijuana overlay extends to that area. Am I incorrect in that?
What's the risk?
Rectory? I don't think it meets the school requirements, does it?
Yeah, there's nothing near St. Mary's in our overlay.
Mm-mm. Okay. I mean, St. Mary's is across from the middle school. Is that St. Mary's?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and I think it's JCS, which is actually within the 500 feet. If you moving down 123, that's the 500 foot buffer. So this area right here.
She's stating that St. Mary's is on South Worcester Street.
The church?
They own property.
The old rectory.
The rectory building, not.
The old rectory.
Is it a school?
A rectory would imply residential.
Yeah, Paul, this is Kevin. She may be referring to the approval not required request to convert the parking lot next to the rectory to 2 house lots. That's my guess.
Yeah, that's my assumption too, that you had that approval not required a few months ago.
But just to clarify that is not related to the marijuana overlay district.
Okay.
The question, Paul?
Well, that's the intent of her question is how does the overlay affect the rectory?
Oh, if she can't get on, then she probably isn't able to view these maps either.
Well, she said it was an audio issue.
Yeah, she is texting. I can see her in the chat.
Yeah, she's texting us or chatting.
I believe that rectory area falls within residential, but I don't.
It's the lot that we're talking about, it's at the corner of South Worcester and Power, across from where Power starts.
Yeah, 132 South Worcester.
Which it looks like the overlay district is right there, Tim. It appears. That long road that goes out to the actual church, I think that's Power Street that comes right into the industrial overlay district.
I need to look it up on a map, I'm sorry.
What's the address again? I'm just looking it up on GeoMaps.
132 South Worcester.
So I guess is the question, is there a school, K-12 school there? Is that why the question is being raised?
No, I just believe she's wondering the impact because of the rectory there. It's a residential area. She's saying it's 125 and 127 South Worcester.
Yeah, but I think 132
and it's across the street from her house. Okay, thank you, Danielle.
125 South Worcester, you said?
Yeah, 125 and 127.
Okay, I just have to compare it. Give me a second here. To figure out which overlay is going to be the best to look at.
It would be the zones South Norton.
So I'm showing 125 South Worcester as being zoned industrial.
That's correct.
Let me see if I can share.
That might be CP.
So the map is South Norton map. That's the
So this is the parcel right here, as searched on the GIS, and it's industrial.
Yep.
And it's within the overlay.
Perhaps her comment has more to do with why is it industrial when there are only homes on those lots? In a rectory. Strange that it's zone industrial in the first place.
Is there a vacant lot over there too, I think?
I mean, there were 4 homes right in that area in the rectory next to it.
I'm guessing at one point they were businesses that had railroad sidings because it is right along the railroad tracks.
Perhaps that little area should be reconsidered as maybe not being part of the overlay district.
So again, this is one of those things though that today that there's residential houses next to it, we don't know what it's going to look like in 10, 20 years, right? It's zoned industrial. It's been zoned industrial. It's already been passed in this particular area. We're just giving it more structure with the bylaws.
Yeah, it's right next to CPS Technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's industrial businesses here already.
I do live back in there. Realistically, I don't think there needs to be a concern someone's gonna start thinking about putting a business there. They wouldn't want to. I mean, regardless of how it's zoned, a person trying to set a business with just a set, that's just not a good spot.
I would tend to agree, especially with the one-way by the cemetery.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't see it as our responsibility to call out what we think would be a great location, topography-wise. Not that's up to the person who purchased the land to make the determination, right? We're doing it based on zone.
Yeah, there's no reason a warehouse couldn't go in there and do very well and not bother anybody.
Yeah, and then it would have to go through the special permitting process anyways.
Right.
Stuff like trucks are a lot of fun.
All right, so we're going to continue this to the 26th. The vote was unanimous, so thank you all again from the IDC, and Renee, thank you for the presentation. We
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it too. And if I may, we just have to adjourn. So the chair for the IDC will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That was from Laura. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Second.
Okay, I got that from Michael. And then we just need a roll call. All those in favor to adjourn at 9:23. Laura?
Yes.
Michael?
Aye.
Sandy?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
And I saw Anthony. Is Anthony still on? Let me give him a second in case he's muted. Let me just look. Okay, I don't see him on anymore, and I vote yes as well. So we are adjourned as of 9:23. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all again.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Paul.
May's plans are still up.
And everybody on the board.
Yeah, Paul will take over. There you go. All right, thank you again. So now we're going to move on to the Village Center Core District Zoning bylaw amendment. So Paul, if you're ready.
I am. Just let me pull this up.
So you're moving completely off the overlay zone and all of that discussion now, correct?
Correct.
Okay, you guys have a good night then. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, are you ready for me to go to the presentation? Okay, so thank you, everybody. We're going to now talk about switch gears to talk about the Village Center Core District. And unfortunately for you, Julie was not able to do this presentation, so you're going to get me, but I'm sure she or Scott or anyone else on the board who wants to help out will help immensely. As you know, you all have seen this multiple times before, and I just want to start by talking a little bit about the process, particularly for members of the public. This proposal actually comes from a village center plan that was completed about a year ago in June of 2019, I believe. And there was a proposal as part of that, an action to promote or to adopt a new zoning district for this area in our village center. And so our consultant provided us with the preliminary draft that was then worked on more by staff. And then we, as you recall, we had 3 members of the planning board and 1 member of the zoning board of appeals work together for a couple of meetings and really refined this draft back in December and January. And then in January, February, the planning board reviewed it a couple of times and made revisions to it. And that's the version that's made it to the town warrant that you have with you now. I also want to point out that we did, probably back in February, we sent a notice, a postcard to the business owners and property owners within the area that was proposed to have this new district, and gave them links and contact information. I've had a few calls about it, not much. We had 1 or 2 calls the week that we sent the notices out. So just to give that context, so you're now seeing this, some of you are now seeing this for the 3rd time, but this is now the 2nd time the board has seen this. So I'm going to just step through this presentation, which is largely the same as before, but fortunately through Scott's great work, it looks a whole lot better. So just going to, now can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to just go through some of the main highlights here, which is the purpose and the proposal for the Village Center Core District. We'll go then to talk about the way people currently experience this district. And then we're going to talk about comparing this new district to the current zoning, which is largely village commercial. And then we're going to give some visuals, some photos of what the Village Center Core could look like. And then finally, we'll talk about our next steps, which, as you know, with COVID-19 going on, seems to be evolving. So there are 2 warrant articles that we are proposing. One is to create the new village. Sorry, can someone mute themselves, please? Thanks. So we're proposing the new Village Center Core zoning district, which will be added to various components to the zoning bylaw. In addition, we have a warrant article to actually apply it on the ground. And so the purpose of all of this village center is to create a more walkable, vibrant portion of our village center. It implements recommendations that came out of our vision plan. It also is there to try to coincide with some of the things that are going on right now in this area, including a sewer extension that's currently under construction, with the thought that when that sewer goes in, we're going to see additions put on, we could see tear downs, we could see things change over time. And we just thought that this would be the opportunity to have better design standards and certain uses that we would rather emphasize and de-emphasize others, to create a place where people would gather, as opposed to a place where people will essentially grab and go. And so I'm showing now the parcels, the proposed parcels that are proposed to be rezoned to this new district. And you can see it essentially runs from the Village Green on West Main Street, essentially from Taunton and Mansfield down West Main Street to the Honeydew on one side. It just doesn't include the L, but right before the L, which is, the site of the proposed, at 60 West Main, the proposed Cumberland Farms. So when we look at this area, it just depends on your perspective of how how you view an area. So if you look at it at this area along 123 from an aerial view, it actually looks pretty nice. You have a lot of trees. The buildings appear to look like they're at a pretty good scale, and it's fairly filled in. But when you start to zoom in and get right down to the street level, you can get a very different experience, especially if you're walking or biking it. And even driving it, it's not the most, it's got its challenges. But it does make it a lot easier to drive a car than it would to walk or bike in this area. You can see, just looking at it, you have a lot of curb cuts. Cars, when there's not a lot of traffic, cars can go at a pretty good speed. The area, though, I do want to say there are good bones about the area. It has some really good local businesses. You see a picture of Wendell's, of course, right across the street is Bog Iron. Other good businesses in this area, but it does lack a distinct identity. The buildings do. I mean, there are a few that are very attractive. Some of them are, quite beautiful, and others are, probably in need of some TLC. The area also has good places, but it does have limited opportunities for people to gather. A lot of the places, like even if you go to a place like in this photo, whether it's Norton House of Pizza or Bagels and Cream, which are both great businesses. I go there quite a bit, or did until but and will when we get back. But there are oftentimes when I go there, it's people just going in, grabbing, going, and leaving. And but it does have places like Bog Iron where people can come in and sit and enjoy the senior center. But more likely, there are places where people don't gather. And in fact, we have a handful of them that are focused primarily on, automobiles. We have repair shops, and again, great thing. Is this the area as we go forward? Is this the right place for that type of use? I mean, these can continue for certain, even with, if we change, they would just now be as a non-conforming use. So we want to look at a zoning district that thinks about different aspects of how we could create a more walkable and vibrant destination. And it has a handful of types of principles that we want to look at. And we'll show you those as we go through the presentation. So we want to talk now about what's the difference between this new Village Center Core District and Village Commercial. And again, largely, other than 4 properties, everything is zoned Village Commercial. So what this chart shows is the differences and similarities between them. But in terms of the uses, the Village Commercial currently, it'll actually allows more uses than what we're proposing for the Village Center Core, but it includes all the uses that we would consider auto-oriented, like gas stations, auto repair sales, drive-throughs. And again, those are the types of uses that have their appropriate place, but if you're trying to create a certain environment where it's walkable, you don't really want those there. Whereas the Village Center Core is focused more on gathering and walkability, and it does have requirements for mixed use, and it prohibits those uses that are auto-oriented. And on the design aspect, the Village Commercial has design guidelines, which, as you know from the board when we've had properties here, you can refer to it, and you have, but with the Village Center Core, we've put standards in now that makes it very clear, to an applicant, to everybody, what would need to be done. So we'll, in a little bit, talk about those things. As I mentioned, there's a couple, 3 existing uses that could become non-conforming, but they can still continue to operate. That doesn't affect their business. The only time this could become an issue is if they cease to continue operations for 24 consecutive months. And if they do that, then a new use would have to come in that conforms with the current zoning. And again, we're only talking about a couple, a few businesses at this time, 2 or 3. Otherwise, if they're proposing to do an expansion, they would have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals if their expansion was above 25% of their floor area. So while the uses are also trying to promote walkability, so too are the design standards, or in this case, the dimensional standards. Again, in many ways they're similar, but there are some distinct differences. One is the height. This one could give up to 1 extra story. The building coverage, meaning the building could take up more of the land than that could be allowed under Village Commercial. The setback, I think, the front setback is a big one because we have put in a maximum how far back they could go. Whereas right now, the only thing it says is you can't go more than 10 feet toward the street. But we have buildings that are 80 feet back off the line, and that creates these wide open spaces that we see there. So this would try to shore those up. The side and rear setbacks are the same. Frontage is different. This is significant because the frontage requirement would be 75 feet for village center core versus 120. And then the lot sizes, lot sizes are less for it. So again, these could do things like promote, lots could be subdivided to create more lots to get, more smaller buildings in an area. As I mentioned, we have put standards in, and those standards are essentially public amenities. So we focus on building design standards, and they focus a lot on, those design standards focus a lot on the buildings, the front of the building's relationship to the street. And that's the most crucial area for a walkable place, is what happens between the sidewalk and the front of that building. If you think about some of the nicest cities you've ever been to, think about, oftentimes the buildings are right there. They come right up. We're also looking at stormwater a little bit differently. They still have to meet their stormwater requirements in terms of what they treat, how much, but we want to treat it also for the beauty of it, because these should be areas where they're gathering. So you have these really attractive rain gardens. They could be a feature that people could use. So your restaurant could even, I'm sure you've been to some restaurants where you might have fountains around and things like that. It creates more than just one win on it. We would certainly be designing transportation infrastructure, such as sidewalks and driveways to promote pedestrian safety and bicycle safety to the street. And then I think another big portion of this is we would be putting parking to the rear side of the buildings. Again, what happens between the front of the building and the street really matters. And you see places where you have a big parking lot between the street and the building, and that just says, don't walk here. That means just drive here. So, and then the number of parking spaces would be based upon a parking survey, a parking study to be completed versus our very antiquated parking requirements in our zoning bylaw. And then there are 4 properties that are zoned residential 60. These properties, 2 of them are right on the village green. They're on Mansfield and 123. It's the old public library that's owned by Wheaton. And then the other are the 2 houses that Miss Pegdooley owns. The reason for looking at those is they're right across the street from the village green. And if those were to become a, let's say, restaurant or an inn or some sort, it could help promote more activity in the village green, which, by the way, is another one of the lots that we're looking at, only because it helps to connect to to prevent spot zoning. But the town's keeping this as a park. We're not promoting the redevelopment of that. That's not our attempt at all. And then the 4th lot is located behind Bog Iron Brewing. You'll remember a few months back you had actually had a couple A&Rs, but one was the property right behind Bog Iron's property, and their proposal was to try to create that into a parking. And in fact, I saw Brian from Bog Iron was on the call a while back, so if he's here, if you had questions for him, or certainly if he's here, I see him. Of course, the use differences are pretty significant. Single family is allowed in residential 60, but not in village center core. Churches are allowed in both schools, and then commercial is not allowed in residential 60, but is allowed in village center. And then you can see the differences in the dimensional standards. And of course, the Village Center Core promotes more than the residential 60 in terms of height, building coverage, setbacks, lot size. So I'm going to just go through a few photos and we'll be done here in just a few minutes. But these are just some images from around their towns, or right around this area. This is a photo from Main Street in Easton. And this just has a lot of good elements to promote walkability. In fact, I will say these are photos I've taken, and they were all taken in the winter. So, in the summer, these are usually more crowded places, but not in the middle of December and January. But, everything from how the building is close right up to the sidewalk to the height of the building. That's a 3-story building, I believe. You see low-level lighting, lights up the sidewalk just fine. You have some landscaping that also doubles as a place to sit. It has a lot of good components to it, and it's just at a human scale. In Easton as well, there is a public, a town-owned parking lot, which many people will park and to go to these sites. So, but other buildings here do have parking in the rear. This is a good example of residential above retail. It's in Pasco, Rhode Island, and this is a new brewery that, unfortunately for them, just opened up in November. But this was one that the town really wanted because they wanted a destination use, and so they have the brewery on the lower level, and they actually worked with the Housing Works group to get affordable housing on the next 2 levels. So they've really created a win-win, but that's another example of how it can look. You can see it's actually fairly close to the street as well. This is from School Street in Foxborough, which is the circle. And just showing this photo just as an example of what you can do around your green spaces to help actually make them much more usable by having uses around them. That there are some restaurants around in Foxborough, around the circle, around their town green. And that's, kind of what we had in mind when we were looking at those properties that are the Miss Dooley's property and the old library. And then this is an example from Broadway in Newport, where the building's set back a little ways, but they did a great job of creating a good pedestrian area with the walkways, the landscaping. That's an area that does get very crowded in the summertime. Again, not in December. And just want to show you these are the properties that we're proposing. And then just the process. It sounds like we're making changes. So we are here tonight, May 5th, but it sounds like we may be going to May 26th rather than the 19th. And that would be your second public hearing, presumably to make your recommendation to town meeting, which again, we're showing is June 8th, but that's probably not likely. So it's iterative, but at least you're ahead of the game right now. And then if anyone has any questions or comments, certainly after this meeting, here's my contact information. And Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Very well done, Paul. Thank you. Yeah, I think we would end up keeping this to on the 19th.
The 19th.
Yeah, I think it was a conflict with the other.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know we've gone through this quite a few times as a board, but does anyone on the planning board have any questions or comments on this presentation?
Mr. Chairman, this is Kevin. Paul, if you can go back to either slide 18 or 13, just for the benefit of the presentation at town meeting.
So Kevin, what I don't see we don't have numbers on it. Could you tell me which?
Keep going.
Okay.
They're right there. Right there, Paul. Yeah. The dimensions, if you can go one, just like half a slide down, the frontage, the setback, that's the one I'm looking for. Yes, thank you. So just for clarity at the town meeting, the current, actually, no, that's not it. Go back up, keep going like 5 slides earlier. That's the residential 60. Similar slide, but the one that shows village commercial.
Okay. That one?
Yes.
Okay.
So currently is the setback, is it greater than 10 feet? Is that how it should be read for village commercial?
It would be, so if you see a setback of 10 feet, it means you can't encroach into the 10-foot. So you couldn't do 9 feet, but you could go, you know, if you're talking about the side setback or the rear, that's just telling you the minimum distance you can place a structure.
Okay. So
I'm sorry. I thought we had
yeah,
a for that, saying that with you can decrease that with a special permit granted by the planning board.
Great point. That is in the Warren article. I can show that to you.
Yeah, that applies
footnote
to
for that.
The side setback and the.
Yeah. Do you want me to show you that?
Well, before you leave this slide, Paul, so my point was, for example, the setback on the front, currently it's greater than 10 feet is the standard, right? And under village center core, would it be between 10 and 40 feet with a max of 40? Is that how that should be read?
Yes.
Okay. So under village commercial, you may want to put the greater than sign before each of those three, and then maybe over to the side and rear also, just so people understand that that's not up to, that's a minimum, and it has to be greater than that. You follow me?
Sure.
Maybe the same thing with the frontage as well.
Yeah, I think would be good to be consistent then with it.
So the main difference here, the main difference is the village center core, it cannot be set back more than 40 feet. It has to be between 40 feet. So that's clear, but under the current zoning, it might be more helpful. Put a greater than.
Right, we would show this as less than 10 feet on the setback, front setback for village commercial, which means, well, anything greater than 10 feet, you can, under today's regulations, you could go back quite far.
And under the new regulations, under village center core, you can only go back 40 feet. So I just wanted to point that out for clarity in the meeting.
Right. Yes.
So that's all. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, we'll change that.
Okay, anyone else on the board with questions? All right, so we'll open it up to anyone. Anyone else? Any residents with questions on this?
Hi, Paula Voss from 16 Mansfield. I'm a little bit shocked by the density that's posed for that. It's the corner with the 4 residential properties that would be changing. Those are about 4 houses down from where I am. And, you know, bed and breakfast, hotel, all sorts of uses there. And I think it might be better to do this in stages where you start with the town center, keep the residential areas in the bog, behind the bog brewery, and then build into it and see how that goes. The residents on 16 Mansfield and some of the other ones further down will have an impact with all the, you know, I mean, there'll be activity which you're looking for, but it has to be reasonable for the residents that are surrounding the area. So that's, you know, a consideration. It's also historic and a lot of the area, and especially on Mansfield. And I don't consider a 60-foot building up to a historic building. That could make it look lovely, but it really does need to fit more in with the town character. We also have a lot of water and swamp around us, and it carries a lot of noise. So that needs to be taken into consideration with the density and the mixed use that's going into the center. So I would propose that you keep the 4 properties, the library, the 2 houses, and then the Bog Brewery as residential until you start building and see what the impact is to the rest of the town. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Pages.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Is there any way that this could be proposed in stages?
Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, you could. I mean, any of these amendments, these properties could be up for consideration. Again, I would say, I realize the concern about those 2, the ones right on Mansfield. Again, the intent there was to try to promote activity along a very busy, our busiest intersection. And it doesn't necessarily mean a building's going to get torn down. It could be a change of use, and especially in a historical district, that would be something that if a proposal went forward, they'd still have to go through the Historic District Commission for approval. But, right, if it did get rezoned, is there a possibility a person could come in and want to do a complete redevelopment? It is. But it also could be, like when I look at Miss Dooley's property, you could see a nice inn there or a bed and breakfast, which wouldn't require, a tearing down of the building. So
You just don't know what you're going to get, so just as a resident, the density, not only on that corner, but down the street there, as well as I'm saying back up to that, there's a lot of swamp and water behind us. And so.
Sure. And right. And they would still.
Coming out of there.
Right. And those regulations still stay in place. And in fact, I think these regulations actually give more flexibility to move a building than say the village commercial district does. So you still have to meet your environmental, your stormwater. If there are wetlands, you can't build on it. But it could give you more flexibility to move a building away from those areas. So, the board could certainly make recommendations to amend the proposal. I do want to point out, you mentioned the property behind Bog Iron. That has been brought to us by the applicant, and I know, Chair, I'll leave it to you when you want to have that. But he might want, if Brian's on, he might want to talk about that. But we were rezoning that to try to work with his wishes of making expansions to his current business, which would require more parking.
Yeah, it's Brian. Real quickly, that lot is one that we've been working with Catherine Murphy and her brother Michael on. We can't legally, apply for that to be rezoned. That came from the Murphys themselves, and Catherine is the actual abutter there. So I guess, running the risk of being kind of dramatic, but if that is something that we're unable to get rezoned and then ultimately utilize for some parking, there's just no way that we can possibly stay in town. I don't mean that as some sort of threat or anything like that, but as a number of folks at Town Hall can attest to, we've been desperately trying to find property in town now for the better part, or actually more than 2 years. Now that sewers are coming right in front of our building, we've come to an agreement with the owner of our building to purchase that building and then do a pretty extensive remodeling of that entire building and then open up quite a bit of storefront, hopefully, in retail space, and maybe even a beer garden out front right along 123. So this concept of having kind of a walkable downtown area from a business perspective is obviously really attractive. That said, while I haven't been in town as long as a lot of folks, I have been a resident here for about 17 years. And it's something that I can take off my business hat and think it would be a good thing for the town. That said, we are currently limited in our building to our little tiny 850 square foot tap room because we don't have any parking. That's not going to change. So like I said, if we're unable to get any more parking somewhere, either by that lot or some sort of town parking availability, there's just no way we can go through with purchasing that building and expanding, and we'd have to look for other space somewhere else. So that wasn't really the way that I wanted to address the topic, to be honest with you. But at the same time, and this is something I've mentioned to you, Paul, in passing a couple times, my concern as a business owner right there is again, I don't know where you're going to park all these people. You know, with coverages on these lots going up, which I definitely support, lot sizes going down, which I also support. I like the concept of having a nice area right off the common where there are some different activities that folks can outdoor cafes and restaurants and things like that. And obviously I'm biased because I think we play very well into that. That said, I think you want to attract people from other areas to this area. I think by definition that means they're going to have to drive there, and then you've got to put these cars somewhere. And I think it's going to be a long road to have all these businesses morph in a relatively small area over time where they're going to be able to accommodate these cars. So, I don't know that there's an opportunity for town parking anywhere, but that would be something I think would be a huge help and would go hand in hand with the development of the sewers coming in as well. So.
Yeah, I have the same concerns as parking, and hopefully with the town center, people would be walking in. I don't know how many people live near the village center, but having a central parking lot would probably be a good idea. Take some congestion away from the center of town. But my concern mainly is the density that's going in there. It's going from a little sleepy town, which we always like to see developed, but density is quite high. And the fact that I'm about 4 houses away from these, commercial, village commercial, it's basically commercial uses. It's not very comfortable for somebody who's in R60, been here for 40 years, and it's historic. So, it just is a little bit of a shock. Is there anybody that's done any kind of design as far as what this might look like, where the traffic pattern would be, where the parking would be? Because once you put this in motion, it's going to just be all up for grabs. So it would be good if somebody had some overview of what it was going to look like.
Well, that's a great question. Our the vision plan that we did not.
Can everyone just unmute, put yourself on mute so we're not getting that feedback?
So we do not have that type of plan that you're asking for. But one thing to consider is when a project, if a proposal comes in, the planning board would be, if it's beyond a certain size, the planning board would be reviewing it, and they would certainly be taking into consideration the uses around them. So while these standards are there, if there's a special permit that they're applying for, that gives the planning board more ability to, work with the applicant to address the needs of the adjacent neighbors.
Well, I think it's a big undertaking, and it seems like this is a little bit the cart before the horse type of thing. It seems like you could try to get some people to, get ideas for who might be there, get somebody to draw something up, even if it's an aerial view, and present that. The idea is good, but it just really it needs to have more content and more standards to it. I know you've got a few here on, the setback and all that, but
right.
I think it would be more saleable to, folks if you could really see what it was going to look like, and that, you know, it was going to be, you know, because you've got a lot of density there. If it goes downhill, it's not going to look good. It's not going to work well. So,
well, right, but the thought behind the standards that we put in is it's going to look better than what could go in if that area starts to redevelop, especially with the sewer going in, and you have that the village center court standards are better than the standards under village commercial and the uses along with it. So, I mean, that was the intent. I actually think it's more applicable, more compatible with a residential area than village commercial is, because of some of the uses that were probably more intense, you know, in terms of traffic and the types of uses that are allowed in there that village center core wouldn't allow.
Oh, you go to that slide that has that on there?
So, but I certainly hear what you're, excuse me, what you're saying, and I mean, certainly it's going to be up, you know, the board can make its recommendation, and then as it goes to town meeting, the public can certainly put out options for adding or taking away properties.
yeah, my first blush would be just to leave the 4 residential properties as is, and, you know, develop what you can, bring it in and see how it works. And I really just, I don't think a 60-foot building really does fit with a town, but, you know, I don't know where you guys came up with that. Is that for 2 or 3 floors of residential on top, or?
Yeah, it actually could be. You're right. Our thought was first floor would be retail, and then 2 or 3 stories above of residential. That's assuming, you know, that could be built. Remember, that doesn't guarantee that a project comes in and does the maximum. Oftentimes, the maximum doesn't happen. But we just thought it would be good to give a little more ability to, or a little more encouragement to get this area redeveloped if we could. There are challenges with 3-story buildings where the numbers don't quite always pencil out, and if you add another story, it could make a project happen. So that's where we were trying to that's where we were going with that. But we do require a mixture of uses. At least the first level has to be retail.
Right.
And it could, you know, a project could come in and it's 1 story, 2 stories. It doesn't mean it has to be 4. It just means it could be. But the planning board at that point could, you know, certainly has some discretion there that they could negotiate, and certainly with neighbors coming in and, you know, identifying their concerns as your right to do, as is your right to do.
Sure, and I would suspect that more people would want to be doing the larger, you know, stories only because of the expense of it all. The uses, I mean, is it possible? I mean, there could be nightclubs and things in there? Establishments open until 2 o'clock in the morning, and I mean, it does indicate that as far as the usage.
Nightclubs, well,
I think this presentation here is just a summary of the actual bylaw that's written, right? So this is more detail, it's more intimate to what is actually required, so.
Yeah.
So what would be
that should be kept in mind.
The town meeting, just a brief overview that you have, or would it get more detailed with another meeting, or?
Well, the warrant language itself would be, well, which is online as well, will also be part of the warrant, so it would be read into the record, or it'll be part of the record. So you'll have the language is all up on the planning board website, and it'll tell you that. Nightclub, yeah.
Just sorry, just for 2 seconds. There's absolutely nothing stopping us or Wendell's from being open till 1 o'clock in the morning right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those businesses have that capability now.
Well,
yeah.
You know, it's that you're not, it's just that once things get hopping, you know, it's possible. I mean, people are in business to make money, and if there's more people, then you know, that will probably happen. But I'm just reflecting as somebody trying to, you know, live and sleep and enjoy our 60.
No, I totally understand that, and I'm not trying to dismiss that. I'm just pointing out that we can do that now.
Yes, no, and I understand your point of view as well, in the towns. It's just that, this is very close to residential, and as you're taking more residential away, it gets even closer. So, and with the water behind us, a lot of noise travels. And those frogs are pretty loud, and, it's just one of those things that we've got a lot of stuff around us, and so it's going to get even noisier, especially as the potential to triple or quadruple the amount of businesses and people. I don't even know how you're going to do it with all the intersection and the traffic there.
I got to correct myself. You said, can a nightclub be allowed?
Yeah.
Remember, we're looking at a mixture of uses, so
right.
It could, but
I'm making mixed uses that could be, it could be allowed. The gentleman just said it could be open till 1. So,
well, if they have to go through the planning board can put in the conditions how late a use can operate.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, they have absolute ability to put hours of operation in, and they can also manage things like noise.
Yeah, the noise.
We certainly don't. The intent was not to create a real raucous environment. It was, more of a place where people could just go gather. You might have, coffee bars, restaurants, brew pubs, things like that. That was certainly the intent behind it. It's not to, really impact the neighborhood around it. That's certainly not what we're trying to do.
The ideal building would be something like a shop with a couple apartments on top. I think that was the intent when it was first brought up.
So I think it's a good idea. I go to Easton a lot. It's lovely there. I'm sure this could have the potential to do well. It's just that some people come in with money and they just want what they want, and they seem to get through sometimes it's small town. So I'm just hoping to keep it the character that it is. And I just find at this point that I'm opposed to the changing the zoning of our residential buildings and the density that is proposed. So I just want to go on record stating that.
Okay.
Certainly need your help if things came to a point where it got out of hand. But it's all good except for if it gets out of hand.
Right.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Well, thank you also for listening. It's a lovely place in this the historic area, and we hope it continues.
Is the fight for who he is going to be a harder fight for that?
Hey, Peter, can you mute your Zoom?
Can I attended a few of these meetings.
Can you mute him?
He is.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see that.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. Greg, go ahead.
Oh, I actually did attend a few of these Village Center Core meetings. And if I recall, there were 3 rings, and each one's got further out and further out from the core.
Yeah.
And I was a real proponent of the emerald of Norton is the reservoir. And I discussed at these meetings tying the center core to the reservoir. And one of the things that was, of course, was, sidewalks along Mansfield Avenue, keeping those beautiful homes on the historical district up and down. But by tying it in, having a marina where the Peterson property is, that would have shops, have beaches, picnic areas, have residential on the upper floors. Across the street from Tang's, that commercial property could be the town parking. Have trolleys go back and forth through the town area, up and down Mansfield. Have crosswalks there, have a boardwalk, boat rentals, fishing. People would come there for the day, to spend the day in Norton. They'd spend the day fishing out on the lake, renting a boat, shops. have little, arts, crafts, shops, restaurants, go into town. The old library is the historic commission. Read up on all the history of Norton. The two houses we're talking about on the corner there, those would be restaurants or bed and breakfast with walking paths, joining everything together. And then you can even take the other half of the reservoir, all the property along the backside, along the reservoir, what's that restaurant? Behind the produce barn, behind all that, have a bike path, have another way to get to the center that's not by car. I was looking at more of the bigger picture of the three rings, tying it together, trying to make Norton a town you would come to and want to spend a relaxing day, spend a Saturday.
Yeah.
Go to the shops, go to the breweries, go to the coffee houses, go to the restaurants, go fishing, have a picnic. That was my big vision.
Well, I think that's something I would share with you too. It's just we're trying to take one area at a time.
Yes, you have to start at the center.
And I understand Ms. Voss's concerns, and it's something we could certainly look at again. But I agree. I think there were other opportunities, and again, we could do it at a scale relevant to Norton. Certainly not trying to create a Boston here, but when you look at towns like Easton and Foxborough, they do have buildings 3 and 4 stories on their main corridors. I mean, it's our region, so that's the goal of this district here, is to do that, what you're suggesting, right in this area. But down the road, we probably will want to look at we need to look at other parts of town to see, are there changes, improvements to the zoning that could get that type of place that we want.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere. The center is obviously the place to start. And then you spread out. But as my dad always used to tell me, pay attention to details. Make sure you start with a good core. And he says, but don't ever lose sight of the big picture.
Right. Well, we're working on a master plan too, so that'll give us.
That's great. I attended these meetings.
Yeah.
But when we're doing the core, we can't be blindsided, put our binders on that if we're just looking at the core. We need to open up and look at the other beauty areas of the town and how to tie it in.
Right.
You're looking for parking. Let's put the parking a little further out. They're going to walk more, but give them a reason to walk.
Yeah.
The pathways, the restaurants, the coffee places, the brewery. I can see the guy in a brewery. I mean, yeah, if he had parking on the street and,
Yeah, we'll need to look at all these other opportunities.
I think it's great.
This area that we will need to look at in the village center, like parking. Some other improvements that we will need to make.
Yeah, this is how we start, I think.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get a new senior center. That land will be available.
Yeah.
You could put storefront in front and parking in the rear.
So what would it take to have an actual plan of what it might look like? A drawing or a layout of the center? Is that something that we could do within a month or so?
I think Paul had showed some options as far as pictures from other areas of what we're looking for.
Yeah, I saw those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean,
Does it depend on the developers that come in?
It would depend.
Yeah.
And you couldn't.
It's going to be 60-foot buildings everywhere. Yeah.
Right, you're going to see a mixture of things, but those plans wouldn't have legal standing. You couldn't make that you have to build this building, but certainly the visual, because we don't have the drawings, that's why we were showing the pictures, just to give a sense of what these could result in. And again, we were explicit about getting pictures from areas right around here to, so people can see for themselves what, those areas, how they function,
Well, do we have any of the images from the original report from Horsley Witten those kind of sketch drawings?
We do.
Yeah, from the meeting we had at Wheaton.
Yeah, exactly. Those are, yeah. Obviously, it's not a layout of the whole center, but it's a picture in location of the type of thing. I think it matches up well with what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And maybe we can just incorporate some of those as visuals here to kind of paint a picture that I think people that we've been talking about a little bit.
We have all of them.
Yeah.
We have all
I
of
know
them.
we had them. It was some more kind of.
So we could put more information out about it, so people can get that sense of it. That helps out. Absolutely.
Yeah. And whoever was looking for those, if you wanted to email Paul, I'm sure he's able to provide them to you directly as well.
Yeah, that's all public information. You just we have so much, you just don't want to bombard people. You just want to get what you think expresses it in the best way. But yeah, we have a large inventory that our consultants gave us.
Yeah, I think the drawings are good. I think the photos of actual locations that we want to emulate does it a great service. So, all right. Do we have any other questions from anyone in the public? Again, we will continue this to the next meeting as well, so there'll be more opportunity to ask further questions. All right. Anyone else on the board with anything to add? All right. So I guess I'll be looking for a motion to continue this to the 19th. To the 19th? Yes.
So moved
This is Scott, so moved. Second by Scott.
Okay, any further discussion?
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Billy did.
I did.
Okay, okay, and then Scott second. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna roll call it. Tim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Oren?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And Kevin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So be continued to the 19th. Again, Paul, thank you for the presentation. Very good work.
I want to thank Julie and Scott too for the help they've been giving on this. A lot.
Oh, Paul, you did a great job. Thanks for covering for me tonight. Appreciate it very much.
You would have rocked it, Julie.
Okay, so now we don't have any further bills or approval of minutes, so I think that's
Chair.
Yes, Paul? Yeah.
You have one more. Let me go to, let's share it. It's the regarding amendments.
Oh, the sign requirement. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So there were two changes on this. Can you see that? It should start with Article 26.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So this first one was a proposed change that you all initiated, which helped clarify what we mean by amendments. So you'll see in the underline where it says, which shall include proposed textual and or map amendments, and then shall be mailed to all property owners. Okay, so this article, I should say, is regarding zoning map amendments and some of the processes involved with that, including that we have to mail to abutters, and this just made it clear that this could be any text or map amendments in this case. So, the other change in this section as well is the deletion of the requirement for us to put the meeting signs out regarding zoning changes. This is, most communities now have gone away from this because of the expense involved, the time, and the relative lack of notification that signs, will provide. we really have the best bang for the buck by mailing of butters directly and then social media as well. So, so as you know, you supported the deletion of this provision. It also had the issue of scheduling issues because we have to put signs out 3 weeks in advance versus 2 weeks that you would get for noticing of butters and the newspaper. So that's all I had to say about those two amendments.
Okay. So the board's already discussed this, but does anyone on the board have anything to add? Okay. What about anyone from the public with questions on this?
Greg Vincent, 23 Reservoir Street. This is similar to what they tried to do at the 2016 public hearing in September, late September of 2016, in removing they tried to remove the newspaper and they tried to remove the signs. And they did not have at that time, they did not have a definition of the word abutter, where later on we established within 150 feet of whatever. Because they were not notifying people who lived across the street because they figured they weren't abutting directly. But at any rate, I think, yeah, it's kind of archaic. And yeah, it's cost prohibitive nowadays to make maps that big. And it did work for me back in 2016. That's how I found out about everything, when somebody put a sign across the street for me. And of course, I never got a letter because I wasn't in the previous planning board. I wasn't eyed as an abutter. And that's when it all got thrown out because none of us were notified. Now, everybody's being notified. That's great, by mail. But I think the town needs to take it one step further. They issue a tax bill every year. They issue water bills every year. If they can just stuff in that envelope, would you like to be notified by town of any events, meetings, hearings? When you return your bill, fill out this form with your email and you'll be notified. At any time, you can be taken off the list or you can be added on the list. Then everybody who has email has at least got a chance to be notified when things are going into town. Because without any other way, it's either you drive by the sign and hope you've got time to read it, or you go into town hall. A lot of people don't get the newspapers nowadays.
Everything's up on the website as well.
Which newspaper are you going to read? The Chronicle? The Taunton? Which newspaper are you going to put your notices in?
Well, we have to put it in the Sun Chronicle. So the state law still requires posting in or noticing in newspapers. So that can't go away until the state changes it, and then
so everybody on the Attleboro side of town will probably read it. Everybody on the Taunton side won't, because they're looking for the Taunton Gazette.
Well, Greg, I think to add to what you were saying about the notification, we've expanded greatly, with Norton alerts to get word out to a lot of people. So, we wouldn't use Norton alerts for a planning board meeting. They have a Facebook page that we post to, but like when there's issues with COVID-19, it's more for emergencies, but we have expanded a lot of our social media capabilities and reaching out to people. I mean, if you sign up for Norton alerts, you can get, anyone can get notices related to the planning board. So, that notification goes,
that's
around town.
That's requiring somebody to go look for the information on a regular basis, which they're not going to do.
Well,
if they signed up for a notification, they would automatically get it. They can read it, ignore it, delete it, whatever. It's just sent out, period.
Well, that's my point about the social media Norton alerts. When people sign up for it, then they do get it. So even our Facebook page has grown pretty significantly because, we're now, we always post agendas, and we're finding that we seem to be getting more responses from that. I mean, there's nothing better than mailing a butters. You get more responses from that, but signs, it's not a state requirement.
No, that sign you put out across the street from Mass Gas.
Yeah.
It's facing Mass Gas, so you don't even know it's there. And it's like 18 inches off the ground. The weeds are covering half of it. And I would have known it was there, and I would have known anything about this if I didn't stop at Mass Gas to get gas for my rider mower.
You ended up getting a notice, though.
Yes, I did, eventually.
Yeah. So this is just, we certainly want to be promoting more even more transparency. This is not about trying to eliminate it. It's just trying to eliminate what we think is a very inefficient and very costly way of an archaic way of reaching out to people, and trying to use and expand on other opportunities that we have. The media center's been a great resource when we've asked them to post things. People watch Channel 15. So we're trying to do
maybe
more effective in a more efficient way.
Oh, I agree. It is.
It's always on the website as well.
Always.
But your channel. But once again, you're telling people to go look for it. Where, okay, you've got the warning thing. All right. Well, maybe when we send out the tax bill, maybe when we send out the water bill, we say, please join if you're interested. Okay. Put a little flyer in with a bill. It's not going to cost you any more postage. Just to get more people aware, get people more involved in the town.
I'll check into that. I'll check into that and see, because I know the town has done various types of outreach efforts to get people to sign up to Norton alerts.
Paul, there's also that e-subscriber on the website that notifies you when agendas and meeting minutes are set up. I was looking on it though. I don't see the planning board on there.
But we should definitely get on there.
I mean, one of the other reasons I found out about this is occasionally on Facebook I see somebody posting something in Norton Neighbors.
Yeah. And
with the COVID virus, I was paying more attention to this because I'm sitting at home. I want to know where locally I can get stuff. And this popped up.
Yeah, well, we post to Norton Neighbors as well.
Yeah, I know, but
go beyond the town social media, but Norton Neighbors is the best one outside of our own. We are trying, we certainly go beyond what the state requires, which is not a whole lot, but we tried to use social media and other avenues to really get it,
I was just throwing out more ideas to get more people.
Yeah.
So to try to press it together, we're already reaching about 10:30 right now.
Yeah.
So this here is eliminating the sign requirement and adding the fact that we'll include the proposed textual and/or map amendments. Does that break it down fairly easily, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any further questions or comments on this particular document?
Just the one that, people are lazy. They're not going to go looking for it. If you give it to them, like they say, if you build it, they will come, If you give it to them, they will read it at least. That's all.
Do we have anything else?
That's all for the zoning bylaw amendments. That's all we had.
Okay. Do we need to, we're not voting on this tonight, right? So.
Do you wish to continue?
Yeah, I think we probably should.
There's more.
Unless someone wants to make a motion on it.
I'll make a motion to approve the deleting in its entirety of 175-12.4 zoning map amendments.
As
proposed in the warrant article 12. What it says there? What's on your screen?
Yeah, does that motion also include adding the wording there, which shall include proposed textual and/or map amendments?
Yes, amended as Steve, the chairman, stated.
Yeah, so basically, we are gonna be warned by mail, and the other stuff's all gonna go away.
The only thing that's going away would be the sign.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table.
Question, point of information, do we have to advertise this for 2 hearings though, before we vote on it? Are we required to do it twice, Paul?
I don't believe you are. My suggestion, and maybe I'm just being overly cautious, is because we're doing this through remote participation, it might be good to continue, just because.
All right, I withdraw my motion.
Well,
we can continue to the 19th. I mean, I don't think it'll be burdensome to add it to the 19th if we want to do that.
No, I agree with Paul. I agree with Paul's observation that the more people that can see it through the remote process is the right move. I think we should be cognizant though of how much we're packing into these things and how long the discussions go. But yeah, this seems a little bit more of a straightforward one. But I withdraw my motion. I agree with Paul's assessment.
Yeah, with the marijuana bylaws being the following week, I think we could probably squeeze this in on the 19th. So with that, I'd be looking for a motion to continue to the 19th.
I move it. So moved, this is on.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Julie, I second.
Thank you, Julie. Any further discussion from the board on this? Okay, we're gonna roll call. Tim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So we'll continue this to the 19th. All right, I think that about wraps up our agenda for tonight, unless there's anything else, Paul?
No, that is it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Now I'll be looking for a motion to.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. That was Julie.
Scott will second.
Yes.
Okay, Tim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And Kevin?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much.